Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 291. I will abuse you till I don't die. Young Master Jun. Our two masters are very graceful. They've always considered victory and defeat to be like mist. Therefore, they aren't bothered about such temporary gains or losses. I disdain the very thought of coming down to your level. However, I think it is impediment to ask third young master what is the appropriate counterverse to your riddle. If an exceptionally good counterverse exists, kindly tell us and broaden our minds. A tall scholar from the Wenqing Heavenly Literature Institute spoke as he stood up. Apparently, he wasn't convinced of their defeat. Or are you a bigger hypocrite than that Li Yuran? Jun Moxie looked at him with a stunned expression on his face. I request that you please use your brain before you speak. Please don't use your butt to deal with every problem. Would I deliberately make things difficult for everyone if I had an appropriate counterverse? Were you kicked by a donkey in your childhood? How can the Wenqing Heavenly Literature Institute produce an idiot such as you? Oh, I see. Are you deaf apart from being stupid as well? I clearly stated that no one has been able to solve it before I set this problem before everyone. I merely borrowed it. From which ear did you hear that I created that verse myself? I think that you either have no brains, or that it suffers from a fungal infection. You want me to provide you with a counterverse? You have some nerve to open your mouth. This institute demands payment when it wins, and starts a fight when it loses? Isn't this unreasonable? No one spoke in rebuttal when Jun Moxie said these words. After all, he had clearly stated that the verse wasn't his own, but someone else's. It showed how tough it was to bring the man to book. The scholars were unable to reply to the verse. Therefore, one of them had asked this question in an attempt to bring back some measure of honor to their institute. Nevertheless, it was a failed scheme. What's more, his attempt provoked a few scoffs from others. That scholar turned red with anger. The others had no idea what to do. Then, Li Yuran suddenly opened his eyes. What's the matter with this man? He has somehow involved me in his problem. What do you mean by a bigger hypocrite than Li Yuran? Dang it! What is this guy even saying? How was I being a hypocrite? Is it possible that the masters may have turned around to send an apprentice to raise a scene after they conceded their defeat? Is it possible that the Wenqing Heavenly Literature Institute is a sore loser? Jun Moxie appeared very angry as he spoke. Anyway, it doesn't make any difference to this young master if you can't accept a defeat. I may not be a good man, but I respect the wise and venerate the worthy. So you've known that you aren't a good person? Everyone in the great hall rolled their eyes. Do you respect the wise and venerate the worthy in practice? It seems like you're trying to pull those two old men's image down to hell. Yan Feng, stand down. A defeat is a defeat. It's pointless to argue. Why would you try for an incomplete victory? This is merely the first level. Do you believe that our Wenqing Heavenly Literature Institute can't pull back in the next opportunity? Kong Ling Yang's lips trembled as he used those harsh words to scold and discredit his disciple. We don't aim for half gains. The Venerable Master Kong was unable to keep his thoughts to himself due to his anguished state of mind. This was the way it was, there was always victory or defeat. However, he had seemingly lost the respect accorded to a master. He had always attained comprehensive victories in the past. However, this feast had always been held on an island in the middle of the Moon Lake. And the emperor would never be present for the occasion. However, the venue was the imperial palace this time around. Therefore, the emperor was present. Moreover, there was no shortage of the empire's high-ranking officials. The importance of this feast was much larger than before. However, he had lost this time. How could he not feel depressed? Fatty Tang had seemingly been the debauchee whom the entire Wenqing Heavenly Literature Institute had hated the most. However, the fatty had suddenly gone down those rankings, and had been replaced by the young Master Jun at the top. It seemed that the people at the Wenqing Heavenly Literature Institute would never forget their hatred for him, even after tens of thousands years. Their hatred for Jun Moxie had suddenly been embedded in their very bones. He, respected Master Kong, spoke the truth. A scholar only ponders on counterverses during his leisure time. The true embodiment of an educated man's talent resides in his poems of accomplishments. Li Yuran smiled without batting an eyelid, and continued, "Is it possible that the Institute won't be able to match up to the young Master Jun in this regard as well?" This sentence was very vicious. If the Wenqing Institute was to concede at this point of time, in front of every civil and military leader of the country, wouldn't it be akin to admitting that the entire institute didn't possess the skill to match a great debauchee like Jun Moxie? How could the Wenqing Institute fall to such a level? How could they agree to leave the matter be? They drew their daggers once again. I can see it now. This Li Yuran's intentions aren't good. This pretty boy doesn't mean well. He forced that master's dagger in an effort to compel me to show my cards. Jun Moxie rolled his eyes and leaned to one side. In fact, he nearly came intimately close to Xiao's face. Then, he smiled and nodded as he brought out his pre-planned card. The Wenqing Institute has brought several scholars, but we also have a large talent pool on our side. How could the young masters from each of the great families shy away at this juncture? This will be a charming tale since this young master and young master Yuran have joined hands to face the Wenqing Institute regardless of who the final victor is. However, young master Li Yuran has just spoken that he admires this young master for many things. This means that this young master has surpassed him. In other words, I'm much better than young Master Li, did everyone hear that? Therefore, there's no reason to challenge me if you're not even on the same level as Li Yuran. This young master is very busy. Each moment of mine is measured in gold. Therefore, I shouldn't waste it. These words had made for a beautiful counterattack. Not only did he tie in every young master present to his worship in one move, he had made Li Yuran the primary scapegoat. These words had played an offensive role and a defensive role. In fact, he had executed this move very cleanly. Everyone exclaimed and changed their gaze. However, the object of their attention wasn't Jun Moxie, it was Xiao. Jun Moxie had leaned towards her, nodded, smiled, and then spoken those words. These words had allowed him room to attack, and then retreat. Even a dumb person could see that he had been trapped in a tough spot. They could make out that he had brought Xiao's pretty face inside the frame as a distraction. How could such a shameless bastard speak such a long phrase without half a trace of obscenity in it? This guy's words were unnatural for his nature. It sounded like a general endorsement of himself, but there was not a single word of profanity in it. That was bizarre. It seems like he had practiced this beforehand. Everyone watched as Jun Moxie fell back onto his chair and closed his eyes. It was evident that he wouldn't explain what he had done even if he were inquired. Everyone from the Wenqing Institute felt powerless. Therefore, they turned to Li Yuran since they didn't have a better option. So, we turned to young Master Li Yuran for advice in the second round. Li Yuran stood up and nodded his head slightly. I am extremely honored. He surprisingly didn't hold any resentment towards Jun Moxie for pushing him to the front in this manner. The young Master Jun had won that round in all honesty. It didn't matter whether the victory was glorious or not. A win was a win. He believed that he was the heaven's favored child. So, how could Li Yuran defeat him? The emperor's gaze invariably flitted across the hall from atop the imperial throne and settled on Li Yuran. However, he continued to observe Jun Moxie, who sat beside Dugu Xiao Yi, from the corner of his eyes. His inner thoughts were incomprehensible. We've heard the opposite side's verses. But everyone knows about young Master Li's famous flute songs. So, how about we compare the melody of our instruments? I, Jin Zhen, hope to ask young Master Li for guidance on the notes. A scholar got up and walked towards the emperor and the big shots. He then turned to face Li Yuran after he had adhered to the necessary ceremonies. He calmly moved his hands and lightly took out a white, jade-shafted flute. Young Master Jin Ying's tunes can move the heaven and earth. How can this Yuran ever hope to compare with you? We needn't compete this round. I admit defeat. Li Yuran smiled bitterly. However, Li Yuran's deliberate admission of defeat had a different purpose behind it. He didn't wish to exert himself unnecessarily. After all, he was in presence of the emperor at the moment. Therefore, he wanted to form a favorable impression on him. He was looking to achieve the same with a timely effort. However, Jin Zhen was a formidable opponent. It would be extremely difficult to beat him in this particular field. Every man in his family was handed down the traditional flute skills after they turned 15. Their music was well known in the entire continent. So, how could Li Yuran possibly win this match? The Wenqing Institute had dispatched him with the hope that he'd win back a round and tie the two sides in a draw. This battle had started to turn rough. He. Young Master Jun and I are ashamed. Our skills are inferior in this aspect, and we're willing to concede defeat. Li Yuran's expression didn't change as he continued. The next round will be taken by young Master Jun. Li Yuran wishes the third young master the very best. I, Jun Moxie, says fuck off. This brat made no efforts. He straightaway conceded his defeat. This is too much. If I had gotten a tough opponent, I would have still roared out a popular song from my throat. I'd prefer to die than to be intimidated to death. These feasts would usually start with mutual provocation by poetry. That was generally followed by the regales of the many accomplishments of great and learned men. After that, it would be time for strategies, tactics, welfare policies, foreign policies, etc. Till every art had been deemed as discussed in its entirety. Jun Moxie's words had prepped the two factions for a mutual confrontation by now. However, the gunpowder-like acrid smell of their rivalry was much more intense than of any confrontation he had experienced in his previous life. Each person who had previously participated in these feasts was aware that the young Master Jun and Tang Yuan were participating in such a fierce competition for the first time. Therefore, they lacked the obvious experience. They had surely participated in fierce competitions in the past. But, their competitions usually centered around topics such as picking up young girls. Those circumstances couldn't remotely be mentioned in the same breath as this one. The Minister of Rites Sun Cheng he would now consult with others and set a theme for poetry. The contestants would then compete fiercely, and then the winner would be adjudged based on their merits. The theme for this discussion is knowledge. I ask both the sides to choose their candidates. Sun Cheng he looked at Jun Moxie, shook his head, and sighed. He could already judge the winner and the loser. Jun Moxie isn't going to win. He's going to make a laughingstock of himself. A scholar clad in blue stood up. It could be gathered from the introduction that he was called Qin Qiushi. It was obvious from his name itself that his parents had an obsession and wanted him to obtain scholarly honors to sate it. I request young Master Jun to grant me a consultation. Qin Shi cleared his throat and spoke. Half the incense stick had burned down, and he had spent the entire time straining his thoughts. The court eunuch assigned the task to write down the poem prepared himself. He put his elbow on the desk, suspended his wrist in the air, and waited for Qin Shi to start. He was supposed to record everything. The brave man had scaled the sky-high icy mountain. He had dared to cross the sea of knowledge. His heart was diligent, he needed no road. The stars in the sky weren't far. He had hoped for his country's blessing in that life. His ardent blood had cast a rainbow bridge. He seemed to be moving inch by inch. Yet, he didn't give up, he brandished his writing brush. Qin Shi was very talented. He had no option since the incense stick had burnt down to half of its length. However, this verse was rather unexpected. His creative concept wasn't first class, but it was well balanced. It could be considered good. He had clearly explained the concept of learning. Moreover, he had showcased the country's lofty ideals and the grandeur of his personal aspirations. The court eunuch finished recording the poem. He then respectfully gave it to the emperor so that he could go over the verses. The emperor turned to look at Qin Shi's face. He looked at him in a profound manner, but there wasn't a single change in his expression. Then, he waved his hand and handed the poem to the court officials so they could pass it around until everyone had looked at it. The court officials nodded after they had looked at it. They proclaimed it to be good. The officials were very talented as individuals. However, they thought that if they were in the same place as this young man, under such enormous pressure, tasked to come up with a poem, with only half an incense stick left, they reckoned they might not have been able to produce such a result. Jun Moxie applauded loudly. I must concede defeat. You're too quick. Too quick. Many thanks for this praise, young Master Jun. I have little knowledge and talent. So, you and the elders embarrass me by overpraising me. Qin Shi spoke humbly of his profound verses. He then continued. Still, I must ask for the young master's guidance in this subject. This person wishes to hear your reply. My reply? This young master doesn't have so much talent. I can't be that quick. It's not in my nature to finish my artwork so fast. Jun Moxie hurriedly and modestly declined the invitation. However, he sounded very disorderly to everyone present. Tang Yuan burst out laughing. He was unable to control his laughter. He even clasped his belly after some time. His face twitched with spasm. It seemed as if he was on the verge of death. Tang Yuan had endured Jun Moxie's influence for a long time. He had clearly understood the concealed jab Jun Moxie had landed with regard to his lasting ability. However, other people hadn't understood the young Master Jun's words. Fatty, nevertheless, had understood their true meaning, and couldn't stop himself from bursting into laughter. Everyone else looked at Tang Yuan with disdain since they hadn't understood the mystery of these words. This fatty is very insincere. You're here with Jun Moxie, but you start to laugh the moment you see his defeat. Such an individual is truly contemptible. The young Master Jun is very talented. So why did he concede defeat? This won't do. He must recite a poem so that everyone can evaluate it. Han Zhidong jumped up and shamelessly egged Jun Moxie. Does the young master despise the thought of competing with us? Mei Gao Jie's eyes turned to Jun Moxie as he continued in an awe-inspiring manner. This is a completely unacceptable way of treating scholars. Young Master Jun belongs to a military family. So, it is unavoidable that he doesn't much literary talent. A gifted scholar chuckled. He was brimmed with a sense of contentment and happiness at this achievement. He seemed very pleased to see Jun Moxie's state of humiliation. So, how's it surprising that he has conceded defeat in this matter? These lines were intended as a corny joke which wasn't supposed to make anyone laugh. However, everyone laughed. And their laughter was full of malice. That's a fact. I do look down on you. Jun Xie was unlikely to speak these words out loud. But now you're asking for me to abuse you. And that too with persistence. It seems that you didn't get enough the last time. You'll feel sorry for yourself soon. Jun Xie snorted coldly. I won't be impolite since everyone is waiting so earnestly for my poems. However, I haven't come across much of poetry during my scholarly studies. Therefore, I shall casually compose a song for everyone's pleasure. Casually compose a song? The young Master Jun is exceptionally talented. His every movement is akin to a poem in itself. He's so admirable. He's very admirable. It was once again Han Jidong. He had come to hate Jun Moxie ever since he lost to his verse. But, how could he allow himself to be beaten by Jun Moxie? A loss at such an event would be akin to the destruction of his future prospects. However, he had been presented with an opportunity to take revenge. How could let it slip by? He wasn't doing it for the sake of the Wenxing Institute, rather, he was doing this for his personal revenge. Wenxing Institute, gifted scholars. Jun Moxie tilted his head and gave a meaningful smile. Is this the proper way to behave? I would be better off riding my horse to the brothel, taking women, and then act in all sorts of tyrannical ways, without refraining from any crime of debauchery if this is the kind of up-and-coming young men the Institute has to offer to the empire? Why do you behave with such a political mindset, and act like a groom who wants to change his bride every night? He spoke those lines very lightly. In fact, it seemed as if he was casually dishing out an abuse on the road. However, the intended listeners paid due interest to them. The emperor's eyes shone and his expression became thoughtful. The big shots stared pensively as well. Everyone suddenly recalled that the Wenxing Institute's desire to emerge victorious had always been strong and unbridled in every competition in the past. Suddenly, everyone's gaze turned towards Jun Moxie. Was this kid genuinely not interested in this contest? Or did he point this out intentionally? Everyone looked very disappointed. The very thought of this is too wretched. Then, Jun Moxie frowned, got up, and slowly made way from his seat. His crooked neck was very stiff as he took 8 steps. It seemed that was moving forward from the movement of his legs and lower waist. However, in reality, his entire body was moving backwards. It seemed as if an unseen hand was pushing him backwards. His chest shuddered, like he had gotten an electric shock. The young Master Jun's movements were very strange and unnatural, yet free and easy. Anyone from his previous world would have recognized his actions in an instant. Those were the very moves of Michael Jackson, the legendary moonwalk, and the robot. These 2 world-renowned moves from his previous world had now made an appearance in this one. A learned man from his previous world would have started to scream by now. That shock move was amazing. That neck angle is insane. That moonwalk is the best. Wow! It seems that you've been possessed by Michael Jackson's soul. It was a pity that no one amongst this world's plebeians could appreciate the art of it. These people were completely blind to the young Master Jun's charming and coquettish moves. Ah, to have talent. Yet no one's there to recognize it. But they'll judge the moment I start to abuse them. This world doesn't understand talent. So, I don't expect these people to understand this. I won't stop until I abuse to my heart's content. I won't back away from this today. Everyone inside the main hall stared at him like fools. They felt that they couldn't bear to watch it anymore. Jun Zhantian's grandson is a buffoon. How can the Jun family come up with such a piece of work? Everyone was speechless. They then saw him twist his waist and come to what was a standard electronic stance. His right hand then brushed up and rested on top of his head, while his left hand made a quick gesture as he snapped his figures. It then went down to his abdomen. He then started to move in a coquettish manner. It had to be admitted that if Jun Moxie had showcased those moves in his previous life, they would have been considered as extremely hard dance steps, and would have been labeled as masterpieces of dance. In fact, these couldn't have been done without a proper foundation and training. But how could Jun Moxie perform these moves? If it were someone else doing it, they too would have been considered a top dancer. However, the people of this world could only associate those extremely difficult and artistic high-level movements with the actions a man makes in the bedroom. Even the women felt the same way about his dance moves. They looked at the high speed and provocative movement of his lower body parts. This is unbearable. Ayo! Jun Moxie screamed. It seemed as if he was groaning. The main hall had the princess, along with several other notable young ladies and the empress, seated inside it. They all cursed in rage. This man is extremely vulgar. He has no shame. He acts in this manner in front of so many people. Dugu Xiaoyi's eyes had started to shoot flames, while Princess Ling Meng's beautiful face had become deathly pale. Their desires had been plunged into the ground. That lecherous beast had broken them into pieces. This is extremely disgraceful. This is too vulgar. Listen to me. 'Cause I speak with passion. Ugly ones won't do. Don't tell me you love me. I'm too bad. Don't be infatuated with this elder brother. This elder brother is a legend. Don't provoke me. I'll make you spit blood. Jun Moxie sung the verses under the public's gaze. However, the tone of his voice was intolerable to everyone's ears as he continued. Don't be smug with me. Elder brother is your daddy. Don't mess with me. I'll cut your tiny thing. Elder brother's heart is a desolate place. I'll kill you and burn everything. You dare to embarrass me? Fu *k that. As Jun Moxie finished, his fingers pointed towards the gifted scholars of the Wenxing Institute to indicate whom he was referring to. His expression was one of rage and murder. I haven't abused you yet. You old fart. You think you can embarrass me? Bullshit. Don't you know who I am? You old man. There was an uproar in the audience. Who were his audience? They were sly public officials who had been speaking their viewpoints for most of their lives. They'd endure every insult and consider their words in order to relinquish their speech of vulgarity. However, Jun Moxie had directly pointed at his opponents and abused them. Each verse was that of a hoodlum, each line was that of a rascal. Then, he had pointed his finger towards the Wenxing Institute scholars at the end, and had hurled abuses at them. Moreover, he threatened and insulted someone of the elder generation. You. Mei Dao Jia and Kong Ling Yang were revered scholars. How could they have ever been humiliated like this before? And not only had that debauchee insulted them before the high-level officials, he had done so in front of the emperor. They were extremely enraged. Their bodies had started to tremble frantically, even their beards. Their fair faces had turned somewhat blue, and their eyes had rolled backwards. It seemed as if they were about to faint from excessive anger. You darned evil creature. Jun Zhantian jumped up. His beard scattered as he descended angrily. He didn't restrain his strength as he gave his grandsons but a strong kick. Jun Moxie seemingly flew into the clouds at that exact, and was about to hit against the main hall's pillar. His brain would have burst out from his skull if he had hit the pillar. However, a man had arrived to save him. But who? Standing opposite Grandpa Jun was Dugu Zhongheng. The two men had worked together for many years. So, how wouldn't one know the other's mood? He had stationed himself at the appropriate spot and caught Jun Moxie. His eyes widened into a glare as he shouted, "Jun Xie, are you that big an idiot? Do you wish to kill the sole remaining youngster of your family?" This old man was something different. He had flatly asked if Jun Xie would kill the only youngster of his family, and seemed determined to stop him, if needed. "None of you try to stop me. I must kill this little animal. We've lost our honor. He has tarnished the name of the Jun family. He'll never turn a new page if I don't teach him a lesson." Jun Xie had gone mad with rage. His eyes had gone red, and his red eyeballs were about to pop out. It seemed that he was going to flay his grandson to the bone. However, those words made the other civil and military officials despise the family. What honor has he tarnished? Jun Xie, do you even know what honor is? Haven't you gotten used to your grandson's behavior by now? How many times has he tarnished the family name today? But you only speak of killing him now. Suddenly, you've changed your attitude, and you wish to teach him a lesson? That's very admirable. However, they restrained those curses within their hearts and followed after Grandpa Dugu. Everyone rushed towards Jun Xie to hold his arms and legs in order to restrain him. How else would they deal with this situation? Tang Yuan cried out in alarm. His voice echoed, "He's dead, he's dead. Someone save him." Third young master. "My good brother, please don't die, wah." Tang Yuan's tears and nasal mucus rushed towards Jun Moxie like a rising tide from the sea. It suddenly got so noisy that the emperor furiously hit the side of his imperial throne and angrily shouted at everyone, "Be quiet! Be quiet! What a disgrace!" The power that came from the throne was such that everyone immediately stopped in their tracks and looked at each other. Their voices started to wheeze as they panted. They felt as if their strengths had been exhausted. However, there were some people who hadn't expended any efforts in this ruckus. "Your Majesty, please do us justice. Please punish this shameless and frenzied young brat." Mei Gao Jia wept bitter tears as he knelt on the floor. Many young students had failed and succeeded over the years. However, had anyone ever humiliated him by the means of such a blatant insult? This instance had been extremely humiliating for him. Jun Moxie lay unconscious on the ground. The corners of his mouth were pulled downwards. He wasn't budging. "I'm very disappointed with today's matter. Very disappointed." The emperor furiously flicked back his sleeve. How can the great families bicker day and night? How can the Wenxing Institute act so petty and narrow-minded instead of contributing towards the good of the common people? This matter ends right now. All of you go back home and introspect. Everyone was dazed by what they heard. The emperor had spoken those words in a very serious tone. Just then they all heard the sound of urgent footsteps. Suddenly, an alarmed voice rang out. "Emergency conflict report." The military officials were stumped as they coldly looked up. A battle was something these bloodthirsty old men had longed for but hadn't been able to derive the pleasure of in a long time. An imperial guard hurried in, kneeled, and presented a scroll to the emperor. "A wave of Xian beasts is attacking our southern provinces. How is this possible?" The emperor couldn't help but frown. He doubted what he read aloud. His frown was very profound. The entire humanity is in danger. Master Shi Chang Xiao and the Shui Han Manor have issued a joint summon to everyone. Are things really that serious? Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 292. Attacked by an assassin. Inside the secrecy of a secluded room, an adorned chessboard was laid out. The black and white cavalry soldiers were engaged in a battle. And the battle had turned very bitter. Brother Wen, how do you feel about today's events? His Majesty gently put down his piece on the board. His actions issued a loud pop sound. Wen Songyu was seated opposite to him. He was dressed in ink-black attire. This was the first that the emperor had seen his best friend adorn such a dark choice of clothing inside the imperial palace. It is difficult to determine. There was no chi fluctuation on his body. That I'm certain of. Wen Songyu's facial expression remained stagnant. However, his eyes flickered as he saw his white pawn falling to the board. Brother Wen, did you believe that you could kill my imperial queen with this pawn? It's not that easy. Ah. His Majesty explained the move. And continued. But I've always felt that the Jun family's little brat isn't a very suitable character. What do you think? He's far more than a suitable character. So, there ought to be something fishy. Mr. Wen closed his eyes and considered for a while. He then continued. This Jun Moxie kid is very odd. He was acting evilly. And without a care in the world. He seemed like a debauchee who was enjoying messing with everyone. But he didn't seem to be pretending as far as this old man is concerned. Elder brother Wen means. His Majesty lowered his head slightly. He raised his finger to his temple and started to massage it. Perhaps he was afraid to reveal himself to everyone. Mr. Wen spoke in a thoughtful tone. It was evident that he had studied Jun Moxie's movements very clearly, and had given them prior in-depth consideration. He was merely using this opportunity to speak his mind. He didn't wish to bring himself out in front of everyone, including His Majesty. Oh, that's what you meant. His Majesty picked up the fallen chess piece from the board, but stopped his hand mid-air. How would you know that? There are no reasonable words to justify. But I believe that Jun Moxie used his renowned behavior to display his arrogance to everyone. However, he also told His Majesty one important thing. Wen Songyu smiled and chuckled. He doesn't intend to dispute the power structure of the world. His Majesty gave the reply on his own. His actions were telling me this very clearly so I can feel at ease. So I never have to fear him. And he used his abusive attitude to inform me of the failures of the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute's education system. He tried to tell me the unreasonable faults of their so-called gifted scholars. He wanted me to see the unseen threats posed by the corrupt officials and bureaucrats. His concealed love for the empire's welfare leaves me in a debt. Yes. That's right. That's the kind of person he is. It's not necessary to be on guard against him. The Wenxing education system has excelled for many years, and their contribution to empire can't be denied. However, they've focused too much attention on nurturing talent over the last few years, but have forgotten to mold their talents with the proper moral education. The Wenxing scholars are shiny at the top, but shaky at the base. They've cultivated talented individuals, but they're nothing more than mere talent. They made a good temporary choice. But when it comes to the welfare of the people, and finding appropriate leaders to solve the public's problems, their scholars are far from the right choice. So, the concealed problem of the Wenxing structure is merely a small problem for now. There are some extraordinary talents within Tian Xiang's group of young heirs to the powerful families. But the main center of attention isn't very big. There are only two people talented enough for us to concern ourselves with. Wen Songyu smiled. One is Li Yuran, and the other is Jun Moxie. Li Yuran? His Majesty the Emperor smiled. Li Yuran is very ambitious. But his schemes aren't. He never reveals his feelings. And conducts himself in a very smooth manner. He's airtight. I've often heard people say that he's very talented. And that his strategies can win a war from over 100 miles. He may be very talented. But mere innate talent isn't worthy of taking note. Why is that? Mr. Wen was puzzled by this turn in the conversation. He couldn't understand why a talented genius wouldn't be worthy of consideration. Perhaps Li Yuran hasn't perceived it himself. But he had every means, every research, and every skill, but he lacks basic attribute. He has everything it takes to make a great official someday, and would probably be very prominent in his career. However, his traits are more in line with that of an official, not a ruler. The emperor smiled. Therefore, Li Yuran can at best become a top official. But his ambition will obstruct his growth at that point. He would be considered worthy of my worries if he were able to take one step further. But he doesn't have what it takes to be a monarch. His ambition is not worthy of my praise. I'm confident that his ambitions will fade out over time. So why should we worry? Would a monarch plot from behind the scenes? Li Yuran is too accustomed to acting from behind the scenes. He won't act even if he comes out on the front lines. His habit prevents him from being accustomed to the role of an emperor. However, an emperor needs to be a figurehead. He is required to face the public out in the open. Therefore, Li Yuran is temporarily a target for monitoring. But only temporarily. We merely need to pay attention to his movements to see if we can use him. But nothing more than that. However, there's no need to eliminate him from the picture since he can cause some waves. But he can't start a tsunami. His Majesty the Emperor had ruled out the Tianxiang city's #1 genius from his list of notable individuals. Your Majesty's thought process is indeed admirable. Wen Songyu carefully considered the angle and approved of it. He had to admit that the royal prerogative of his friend was indeed much superior to his own abilities. There was a world of difference between the thought process of a monarch and that of a martial scholar. It was similar to the proverbial distance between the heaven and the earth. The two ideologies followed very different paths. That Jun Moxie is far more dangerous than Li Yuran. The contrast in the threats they pose is so massive that it can't even be mentioned in the same breath. Li Yuran's progress will be limited to some point. But Jun Moxie is a hidden dragon. He is bound to fly high once he grows up and spreads his wings. He had made it clear that he has no thirst for power. But he will become someone noteworthy no matter how his life develops. Li Yuran can turn the clouds and make it rain with one gesture. But he is controllable. However, Jun Moxie will become an unstoppable master of the sword once he matures. And no one will be able to stop him. His Majesty sighed deeply. There are several people in the mainland countries at the moment. However, this land has never seen peerless talents like Jun Moxie and Li Yuran. I wish I had 50 years to sit and watch these two youngsters. Their achievements could become the pillars of this empire once they come of age. They could write history. Moreover, their natures are very complementary. That would allow them to maintain balance of power. Therefore, they are suited to become excellent partners. However, I don't know what these kids are for my Tianxiang nation's future, a blessing or a curse. His Majesty is in the prime of his youth. He is young and energetic. Where do such thoughts even stem from? Wen Songyu spoke in a comforting tone. I'm clear about the reality of my physical well-being. Perhaps my body will persist for 10 to 20 years, but it won't hold for much longer than that. The effect of the pain from those wounds will start to show their effect in time. Even the malicious king of medicines had made that clear. I will not live for long. There's no need for you to comfort me. I only have one concern. And it is the cause of my deepest worries. I've met two individuals that the world has never seen. I can keep them in check as long as I shall live. But once I die, my three sons don't have the skill to control them. They don't have the skill to suppress even one of these two kids once they've spread their wings. His Majesty sighed with a sense of disappointment and frustration. The four seas are calm. The borders are peaceful. Every family is loyal to the throne. I believe that such an instance will not happen in the near future. When Song-yu continued, His Majesty can rest assured. This lack of disturbance in the situation is the main reason behind my indecisiveness. Perhaps Brother Wen doesn't see it yet, but Jun Moxie and Li Yuran have already replaced the balance of the older generation. These two are the key figures in the balance of the present civil and military situation. If one causes trouble, this balance will break in an instant, and this prevalent domestic calm will be torn apart. These two have chosen to preserve this balance for now. However, there is no assurance that they will in the future as well. The harm they can cause isn't minor. There are bound to be turns and twists at every point in the future. His Majesty's idea is to eliminate them. When Song-yu pondered on His Majesty's words for a while, he then lowered his head and asked in a soft voice, The Jun family has suffered a lot of late. So, how could I eliminate their only surviving heir? His Majesty smiled bitterly. However, Mr. Wen wasn't convinced by his words. Let's just say that this isn't the appropriate timing. Think about it, Brother Wen. There would be a widespread unrest in the empire if Jun Moxie were to die. Would the empire be able to sustain such a major storm? If he is to die, he must die from a real accident. Otherwise, this isn't the appropriate time to eliminate him. The entire Jun faction will counterattack. It would become a situation of life and death. We can't make a move until the Jun faction has been disintegrated. He sighed. Moreover, let's not forget that Jun Moxie is backed by another family apart from the Juns. Their strength may not be as formidable as the Xuan Manor or the Silver Blizzard City, but their retaliation at the time of Jun Wuhui's death shook the entire continent. He sighed with boundless regret. It seemed that the regret in this sigh had originated from the deepest abyss of his soul. Wen Song-yu could tell this very clearly from the sigh he just heard. However, he couldn't tell why the emperor had chosen to show the emotions of his heart in regard with this matter. He couldn't understand why the emperor regretted and repented this incident. The Donghua family. The world's most powerful family of assassins. Wen Song-yu opened his eyes wide as he exclaimed, Didn't they disappear 8 years ago? Is Jun Moxie backed by the Donghua family? You've guessed it right. His Majesty the Emperor painfully closed his eyes and tilted his head upwards. After Jun Wuhui and Jun Wumeng were mysteriously killed in battle, the Donghua family's top assassins suddenly and frantically charged out to take revenge. They came out to confront the Tianxiang Empire. They came out to confront the Silver Blizzard City. They came out to confront the entire continent. And they soaked the entire continent in blood to avenge Jun Wuhui's death. Nearly every foreign personnel of the Silver Blizzard City was assassinated in the year that followed. Several generals who had opposed Jun Wuhui on the battlefield were assassinated as well. And that's how I received this injury. The Donghua family sent 17 of their best assassins to kill me, and they inflicted me with this mortal wound. I still haven't been able to recover from it. My body can never recover from the damage caused by that injury. Silver Blizzard City's Xiao family wasn't the only one who sent out their elites to match them. The Xuan Manor came out to confront the Donghua family as well. These elite warriors battled in secrecy. This battle lasted for 1 year's time. Eventually, the Dongfang family was suppressed. The Xiao families Xing Yun and Bu Yu lead the final battle against the Dongfang family. Li Zhutian and Fan Feng Shui had signed a pact, and they testified that they had eliminated half of the Dongfang family's strength at the time. However, the Dongfang family wasn't eliminated. They gathered their younger generation and went deep into the secrecy of the mountains to hide. They made an oath at the time of their retreat: the Dongfang family will never show up on the mainland again, not unless the snow-capped sword peak collapses under a landslide, and the Tian Fa forest's Xian beasts meet their end. Not unless the snow-capped sword peak collapses under a landslide, and the Tian Fa forest's Xian beasts meet their end. Wen Songyu knew about this oath. However, he couldn't help but tremble when he heard it again. The sword peak resides at the summit of the snow-capped mountains, and has remained there for the last 10,000 years. How could it collapse under a landslide? The Xian beasts live in the sanctity of the paradise of their inside the Tian Fa forest. How could they meet their end? Doesn't that mean that the Dongfang family will never come out in the open again? That isn't necessary. The Dongfang family will dispatch its troops in case someone stirs up their base. And their base lies with the people they care about. Jun Mo Yu and Jun Mo Cho died in battle 5 years after they made their oath. The Dongfang family dispatched their troops once again. They claimed that they needed to extract revenge. The Tianxiang generals commanding that war didn't survive that assassination spree. The heads of those generals were thrown into the imperial palace at night. There was a note attached to their heads. The note read, "If Jun Moxie were to meet with a mishap, the Tianxiang imperial palace would be the next target. No one apart from me knows about this secret. Not even Jun Zhantian. And Brother Wen, it's been 3 years since, and we still can't stop those assassins from entering the imperial palace." The emperor's voice reeked of anger. There was strong trace of weakness and humiliation in it as well. Jun Moxie is the last surviving son of their daughter, the last grandson of their female bloodline. A gamble with his life could result in the death of the entire royal family. Jun Zhantian had insisted against rebelling with their support. In fact, he had broken all ties with the Dongfang family. His Majesty smashed that white chess piece onto the board with a pop sound, and a few pieces on the board scattered. His fingers trembled as he hung his head. "Elder brother Jun has showed undying love for me. I can't do this to my brother." Then, he suddenly looked up and spoke. "This, I have to admit. I'm always the emperor. I'm always the monarch of my nation. I will never be a father to my Tian family. The emperor shall be ruthless. I must always think in favor of the imperial power. I must always consider the future of this country. I cannot allow any possible threat to my imperial power to exist. And I cannot think of my brother's feeling when so much is at stake. Perhaps this is the reason why the emperor's post is the most desolate. He must be cut off from the rest. He must be cut off from the rest." Wen Songyu was silent for a long time before he heaved a deep sigh. "Therefore, we can't make any moves on the survivors of the Jun family. No matter what side they take, we can't make a move on them. Even if there is a reason to eliminate them, we can't make a move on them. If they die, they must die in a real accident. And no matter what happens, the royal family's members mustn't be involved in this accident in any capacity. Otherwise, if we were caught, and the Dongfang family were to lose their mind again. Brother Wen, the situation isn't the same as if it was 10 years ago. We're on our own since Yunbichen left. If the Dongfang family comes back, my Tianxiang would be in mortal danger. A real accident, killing a man like Jun Moxie in a real accident." Mr. Wen sighed. will be very hard. It's not that hard. His Majesty smiled deeply. There was a complex expression in his eyes. This accident would need a fortunate timing. And fortunately, the timing for this accident has presented itself. He then slowly pulled out a scroll from the sleeves of his robe, and then rolled it out on the chessboard. The Xian beast wave? His Majesty intends to. Wen Songyu's eyes lit up as he heaved a sigh of relief. This incident has happened in the southern parts of Tianxiang. No other country is involved in it. However, if the Shui Han Manor's forces were to fall, the first to suffer would be my Tianxiang. His Majesty frowned his brows, leaned his body backwards, and turned his hands. So, we need to mobilize our troops. And the might of this army mustn't fall short. Therefore, every major family from the capital will be asked to volunteer their people. We will create an army of elites, and then assign them an army of tens of thousands. The people to volunteer for this army will hail from the Murong family, the Tang family, the Li family, the Song family, the Jun family, The entire capital will be emptied once these people march for the south, and I shall make use of these days and prepare my 3 sons. And then we shall wait until they return. I believe that matter can change with the passage of time. The entire situation would have changed by the time they return. His Majesty smiled and said, "This force will be massive, and every major family will be asked to volunteer. Who wouldn't wish to join this army if its might and strength were to be so excessive, ha." His Majesty the Emperor's laughter reeked with a cold and malicious intention. Who wouldn't approve of such a massive force? Who wouldn't wish to join such a massive force? No one would pay heed to the Xian beast's threat before signing up for this army. The majority would be met with a dead end. Has His Majesty chosen the leader of this army? Wen Songyu asked even though he had guessed the answer. Jun Wuyi. The Emperor smiled monstrously. Who apart from Jun Wuyi could lead this army? Could there ever be a more suitable candidate? A cold light flashed in the Emperor's eyes. I don't know why you organized that auction at the aristocratic hall, Jun Wuyi, but I've gone one step ahead of you this time. And I'm going to hinder your plans in their tracks. These Tianfa Xian beasts have come as a blessing. Outside the imperial palace, Jun Moxie's face was clouded in darkness. It seemed as if his sharp and eagle-like eyes were angrily watching the emperor. It seemed as if he was looking at the emperor's back. In fact, he could barely hold himself in check. The young Master Jun had started the art of unlocking the heavens' fortune to spot any hidden spies in the vicinity. However, he had come across something very unexpected. He whispered, "Fatty, I had asked you to collect the herbs. How many have you managed so far?" "I've just started." "How many do you think?" Tang Yuan was stunned. Young Master Jun had asked him to collect some of the rarest herbs a few days ago. Therefore, it would have been odd if had somehow manages several in such a short period of time. "Listen, I want you to collect those herbs for me in the shortest possible time. I don't care what method you resort to in order to accomplish this task. The sooner the better. Make a public announcement if you have to. Spread the word for the acquisition of these herbs. You must purchase them even if you have to pay 2-3 times the price. Also, I had mentioned 3 special herbs. If you find them, get them, no matter how astronomical their price. Basically, I want them as fast as possible, and I don't care about the cost or the means. I want you to send over the herbs you've acquired to me each day, and I want you send me a batch in the morning, in the day, and the evening. Even if you've acquired only 1 herb, I want you to send it over to me. I want them all as soon as possible. Do you understand?" "I understand. I will do my best." Tang Yuan could sense the urgency in Jun Moxie's body language. Therefore, he agreed without any hesitation. Jun Moxie exhaled a long breath. His eyes seemed very dignified. He turned around and stared at the imperial palace's building, which dazzled golden under the sunlight. It seemed as if he was gazing into two unseen eyes that were staring back at him. He recalled his performance at the event, carefully considered it, and then calmed himself down. The emperor had been suspecting him. He had realized this at the aristocratic hall's auction. This feast at the imperial palace had merely come as verification to the emperor. No matter how arrogant Jun Moxie had acted, no matter how carefully he had planned his behavior, no matter how meticulous he had been, he still wouldn't have been able to alter this fact. He would have only found a temporary relief if he had given up on his pride and reverted to being the previous Jun Moxie. However, this temporary relief would have allowed the royal family to become more aggressive in their actions against the Jun family. However, Jun Moxie would rather die before he'd back away. Having balls does not make you a man. It is the incomparably indomitable spirit which does. These ancestral teachings had become the hitman Jun's motto. Therefore, even though Jun Moxie had come across as a debauchee to most people inside the imperial palace, but he had demonstrated his true and unrestrained arrogance in reality. He had done this because he had come to realize one important thing when Fatty Tang had stumbled into the main hall with the chair hanging up his buttocks. If the emperor wanted to make a move against the Jun family, he wouldn't need a reason, he wouldn't need any reason. Even if Jun Moxie was genuinely a senseless debauchee, and the emperor decided to eliminate him, he'd do it without a second thought. On the other hand, if the emperor didn't wish to make a move against the Jun family, he never would. Even if Jun Moxie was the most talented man inside the entire empire, nothing would happen to their family. Jun Moxie had realized that his fears were baseless. Moreover, the Jun family had a certain amount of protection at this point. The solitary falcon's reputation as one of the 8 great masters would unlikely fail them over the period of the next year to come. As for a year later, Jun Moxie was confident that any man who'd wish to make a move against the Jun family would end up paying a very heavy price for it. Jun Moxie hadn't planned to drag the Silver Blizzard City's matter for too long either. He sighed as he recalled that he had the 9th grade Xian core in his hands. That Xian core was waiting to upgrade a person's strength. The ideal person was available as well. However, he didn't have the required herbs. The Hongjun Pagoda, the flame of primal chaos, and the furnace of good fortune were ready, but he didn't have the necessary herbs. Herbs, this was the crux of the matter. The entire predicament could be described in just one word. Jun Moxie frowned as he sighed. Jun Moxie had recited the Book of Folk Remedy in his mind several times in the past few days. In fact, he had memorized the preparation's conditions of every herb and ingredient by heart. However, Jun Moxie had come to realize that he could only refine some low-level drugs. Moreover, the success rate of this refining process wasn't bound to be very high. The second layer of the art of unlocking the heavens' fortune only allowed him to refine drugs which could enhance a person's skills. Moreover, the herbs required for refining of these so-called low-level drugs weren't particularly valuable or rare to find either. However, Jun Moxie was very dissatisfied with this, since the instructions on the book revealed that these medicines may increase a person's skills, but they'd only do so temporarily. The effect of this enhancement would not be permanent, and wouldn't last more than 8 to 10 years. Moreover, these drugs couldn't be taken repeatedly. This had left Jun Moxie very dejected. He felt, is the Hongjun Pagoda's ability to refine drugs not even at the same capacity as the Xian Beast's Xian core? It must be mentioned that a level 9 Xian core could enhance a person's skill by many levels in a single shot. Moreover, the drug would even ignore the person's rank and level. So, how could that effect be compared to a temporary enhancement? There are some bottlenecks a person isn't able to break through in his life. And most people are never able to reach the higher levels even after their deaths. That's the reason why the Supreme Masters were in such a short minority. Jun Moxie had expected far too much. He had only unlocked the second layer of the pagoda. Therefore, the ability to refine such drugs was more than he should have asked for. A 9th level Xian core was very precious. How many of such would exist in this entire world? Even if there were more than a few, how many people could acquire and refine their cores? It must be mentioned that some people had been able to acquire medicines which could enhance their skills. But no one had ever refined a medicine which would promote any individual's skill permanently. His methods would allow him to produce medicine which could enhance a person's skill for 8 to 10 years. And the cost of the raw materials wasn't very high either. The news of this matter could create an unprecedented uproar in the world. Moreover, the young Master Jun planned on mass production of these medicines. Therefore, his ability to produce more powerful medicines was likely to increase with the enhancement of his refining efficiency. However, a man with a belly full of food never understands a hungry man's hunger. Jun Xie was atop his horse. He gazed at his grandson with a tense and unmoving expression on his face. However, he felt very happy inside. He didn't believe that Jun Moxie's performance at the Imperial Palace would lead to anything significant. Therefore, he didn't care much about it. Who inside this Tianxiang city could dare to harm my only grandson? In fact, who in this empire could dare to harm him? My grandson will rise to the top. That's what a Jun does. A sudden change happened in front of everyone while Grandpa Jun was busy feeling complacent. A strange shadow abruptly appeared under the sunlight. It created waves as it twisted midair. It had emerged from the cover of the trees on the roadside at an unparalleled speed, and had made its way towards Jun Moxie like a streamer of light. This streamer of light had arrived in front of Jun Moxie's chest in a flash. The accuracy and the timing of the attack had been unparalleled. The timing and speed were so unparalleled that even a Sky Xian Jun Xie was unable to act in time. This incident had happened in front of the Imperial Palace. Someone had decided to assassinate Jun Moxie at the most unexpected time. Everyone felt that they were in a dream as they watched that stream of light penetrate into Jun Moxie's chest. The streamer of light continued to push in. Then, that streamer of light retreated at the same pace it had showed up, and made its way back to the cover of the trees. It climbed up a tree on the side of the street. Then, the tree shook and the shadow disappeared without a trace. From the start to the finish, everything had happened in the blink of an eye, and everything was over by now. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 293. A sharp sword on the verge of being unsheathed. The assassin turned his waist around to take a look once he had climbed the tree. However, no one noticed that since everyone's attention was fixed on Jun Moxie. Before anyone including Grandpa Jun had the time to feel any grief, Jun Moxie roared, "Nah!" But anyone who hadn't listened carefully thought that he had shouted, "Ma!" Jun Moxie's chest had been pierced as far as their eyes could see. This meant that he should have been covered in blood. However, he wasn't dead. In fact, he was perfectly fine. There wasn't a single bloodstain on his body, nor was he injured. Everyone stared dumbfounded. What is going on? Jun Moxie's chest was pierced by that double-edged sword. How's he? Jun Moxie's senses had raised in alarm the moment he had come into the assassin's range. He had been a vicious assassin in his previous life. He had gained invaluable experience in the art of assassination. His intuition had become very sensitive towards impending. Therefore, he had sensed that someone intended to murder him before the attack was launched. Jun Moxie's expression had remained the same, but he was mentally prepared to face the attack. However, the speed of that assassin's movements had managed to surprise the young Master Jun. He's extremely fast. The assassin had come over like a shadow and attempted to pierce Jun Moxie's chest. He was so quick that Jun Moxie had barely managed to raise his guard. In fact, he had gotten so close that Jun Moxie had actually felt the extremely cold temperature of the assassin's sword. Jun Moxie was the only person who was able to see his assailant's eyes. They were devoid of any warmth. They were deathly still. In fact, the cold of his watchful eyes were no different from that of a dead fish. And then, his speed has created a dusky shadow. This man is too fast. It's too late to dodge. His years of experience had been rendered useless in front of that assassin's speed. The blow would have been fatal. Jun Moxie had then made a quick decision. He had no option but to expose himself. The third young master then quickly used his greatest ace and escaped into the Hongjun Pagoda to save his life. But the speed of this unforeseen incident had seemingly created afterimages during that transition. So, it had seemed to everyone that the double-edged sword had passed through his chest. Then, he instantly came out of Hongjun Pagoda and resumed the same body posture as his previous one. This entire sequence had happened in the blink of an eye. It was too much for the bystanders' eyes to interpret. So who would have been able to suspect that Jun Moxie had used a supernatural technique to save his life? So, everyone cried out in alarm. The earthen Xian light of that man remained still for a moment, and then followed his line of attack as he launched a second attempt. Jun Zhantien had already positioned himself in front of his grandson. His body got shrouded in blue light as he summoned his entire strength. Then, he suddenly started to throw punches. And each one of his punches exploded in the air like thunderclaps. It was evident that he was employing his full strength. However, his attacks only hit the voids of the air. That overbearing yellow light scattered at the moment it came in contact with that blue light. It then disappeared without a trace as if there was no force behind it. It's an afterimage. Jun Moxie opened his mouth to speak as he watched that Xian light disappear. There was very serious expression on his face. The assailant's Xian Qi level couldn't be considered very high since he was only at peak Earth Xian level. However, his speed was strangely fast. The solitary falcon was famed for his speed. However, Jun Moxie reckoned that he'd only be able to match that assassin's speed, and nothing more. He was so quick that he managed to leave his afterimages behind. How dreadful is his speed? How could a mere Earth Xian expert have such an incredible speed? Jun Moxie wasn't the only one who was unable to comprehend this. Everyone else around him was a Xian expert, but they weren't able to make head or tail of it either. Does a person with such speed really exist? Jun Moxie gave a dull smile as he realized that everyone was on guard against the enemy. Don't worry. He is very fast. But I think he can only strike once at that speed. Wouldn't he be fiercer than Yunbi Chen if he could continue to attack? Suddenly, everyone came to themselves. They realized that even though that assassin's speed was dreadful, he could only strike once. But only a few people who could have avoided that blow. Even a Sky Xian expert may have sustained serious injuries. He wouldn't have died. but he would have surely been injured very seriously. So, how was Jun Moxie able to dodge that attack? However, no one knew that the young Master Jun was covered with layer upon layer of cold sweat. The fear of that event was still lingering in his heart. Such a lightning-fast death strike. He had never heard of such speed, not even in his previous life. Even Jun Moxie's unique assassin techniques couldn't cope with it. Such speed had surpassed the apex of the human body's capabilities. That isn't to say that nobody could achieve it, since it could be done by the Supreme Masters. For example, it wouldn't be surprising if the solitary falcon was able to match that speed at the peak of his abilities, or even exceed it somewhat. But this speed had been demonstrated by a person who was a mere Earth Xian expert. It had genuinely transcended the scope of expectation. Jun Moxie had always been very conceited and self-confident. He'd looked askance at the world's great warriors and warlords, and feel that his age was the only reason he hadn't surpassed them. He was extremely proud of his speed. In fact, he was so sharp in his previous life that he had once dodged a bullet that was fired from a sniper rifle merely 10 meters away. And not even a hair on his body was hurt then. In fact, his comparative speed wouldn't fall short of anyone in this world either once he'd initiate the art of unlocking the heaven's fortune. However, he was unable to evade that thunderous death strike with his usual method. Couldn't it be said that his speed was faster than a bullet fired from a sniper rifle? A bullet from a sniper rifle could travel at 900 meters per second. It was nearly thrice the speed of sound. Jun Moxie was extremely shocked. He had managed to dodge that thunderous attack, but he was sweating profusely enough to soak his clothes. His feet had always been firmly fixed on the ground in every encounter in his previous life. But he was saddled on top of a horse in this instant. This was a noteworthy difference. However, that assassin's speed was indeed dreadful. Then, Jun Moxie was suddenly struck by an idea. It's impossible for an Earth Xian expert display such speed. However, it may be possible to attain such speed on occasion if one were to possess a unique skill. It would be something similar to Hai Chen Fang's self-destruct skill, but in the context of speed. From the angle of this analysis, that assassin may not be in good health after the usage of this technique. In fact, he may have injured his vital internal organs. Jun Moxie's eyes became stern as he gazed in the direction of his assailant's departure. This man is really dangerous. It was very fortunate that no one had gotten injured in that assassination attempt. But everyone remained on guard on their way back home. Meanwhile, Tang Yuan separated from them after some time, and hurried to the aristocratic hall to get the money for the herbs. They soon reached the gates of the Jun residence. Then, Jun Zhantian finally asked his grandson the question he'd been suppressing this entire time. Moxie, how did you dodge that attack? He had chalked this question in his throat on the way home. He had introspected and realized that he himself may not have been able to dodge this strike. So, how was his precious grandson able to evade that attack? Jun Moxie admittedly possesses some remarkable abilities, but this wasn't a matter of skill. It was a matter of timing. There was no shortcut to this. Therefore, it was only natural that Grandpa Jun was baffled. Jun Moxie smiled dully as he looked at his grandfather. Then, he spoke in a serious manner. You don't need to worry, grandfather. As long as I'm your grandson, no man can ever kill me. No matter what. Even the 8 great masters can't harm a single hair on my body. I'm extremely confident about that. Ah! Jun Zhantian started shaking at the spot. Isn't this brat bragging a bit too much? Grandfather, this relates to my biggest secret. Jun Moxie winked in a ridiculous manner. It can be used as a last resort to save my life under any circumstance. You wouldn't want me to expose this secret, would you? I see. Grandpa Jun heaved a sigh of relief. Then, he raised his eyebrows and smiled. Grandpa Jun didn't ask what the secret was. He was a mature man who had seen many things in life. So, he naturally knew that genuine secrets were to be kept close to the heart. And, the higher the number of people who knew of that secret, the higher the probability of its exposure would be. Therefore, he didn't wish to inquire any further as long as he knew that his grandson possessed such means. Xie. Then you must treat it as your most precious secret. Grandpa Jun looked relieved as he warned. Don't even tell your future wife. You must keep it sealed in your heart. Your life will depend on this. Having such an ability is akin to having a trump card. It is your secret power. But you'll lose this secret power once your trump card is exposed. Don't worry, grandfather. I understand. Jun Moxie said, somewhat moved. My grandfather cares for me from the bottom of his heart. No one had ever shown him such care in either of his two lives. His Majesty will certainly deploy troops this time. Jun Xie was the only one in the family who hadn't gone to the Golden Scholarly Talent Feast. So, the grandfather-grandson had told him about everything that had taken place there. He spoke in a tone that reflected his confidence. His Majesty will certainly take action this time. His Majesty wouldn't have read this out aloud by mistake even if the sky had come crumbling down. Grandpa Jun nodded, but remained silent. Jun Xie had succeeded his father as the head of the family after his recovery. It was Jun Xie's responsibility to make the decisions. Therefore, Grandpa Jun would try to talk as little as possible so as to allow Jun Xie to shoulder the family's burden. He'd give his opinions only when an extremely difficult situation, or an unexpected one, arose. Even then, he'd merely suggest his views. Nothing more. He'd only dive into the matters half-heartedly. He'd never show excessive intervention. It seems that I should get ready. Jun Xie chuckled happily. His eyes reveled in the dreams of a battle. The long-forgotten warrior had awakened inside him. Why? Jun Moxie was very clever. But he couldn't understand this sentence. He couldn't fathom why Jun Xie would need to get ready if the emperor was to send his troops to battle. It was important to know that only a few people knew of Jun Xie's full recovery. He was still a cripple in the eyes of the common people. Actually, this Golden Scholarly Talent Feast wasn't a festival in its strict sense. Jun Xie sneered and said, "This feast was held for you, Jun Moxie. You were the main reason why this event was organized. You would have been exposed no matter how you had acted unless you had willingly taken those insults. Your counterverse was vulgar, but you were able to come up with it in such a short period of time. This is a talent in a sense. Therefore, the feast ended right after your counterverse. That too at the emperor's bidding. This means that His Majesty had reached a conclusion by then." Jun Xie gave a wide smile. "Moxie, you haven't seen the usual disputes that take place in the imperial court. The situation at the palace was chaotic today, but there have been many such incidents in the past. Some were even worse. So, why was it that the emperor was so intolerable towards it today? That is why. I think that our Jun family was being targeted by His Majesty by the means of this event. Moxie, you must have left some small clues. And the emperor, being an overly suspicious person, would ask the question why. He wouldn't think that our actions are for self-preservation. He would view them with jealousy and suspicion. The emperor must think that we're biding our time and planning something big, regardless of whether our intention was devious or not." Grandpa Jun released a long sigh from the other side. It seemed like he didn't wish to hear what was being said again. He had already thought the same thing that Jun Xie was mentioning at this point. However, he hadn't brought it up. He knew that it was a possibility, but he hadn't spoken of it since he was holding on to his delusions. To think that after being like brothers for so many decades, the emperor would treat his family in this manner. He felt very sad at the thought of it. The emperor is a very suspicious and cautious man by nature. Therefore, I believe that he's unlikely to use a thunderous move against our Jun family. He would first seek to weaken our family's strength little by little. And I'll be the first one to bear the brunt. This attack by the Tian Fa Xian beast wave presents him with the perfect opportunity to deal with me first. Jun Xie spoke these words unenthusiastically, but a cold and sharp light flashed in his eyes. The man could see the big picture. Jun Moxie smiled mischievously. He's gravely mistaken if he thinks that way. Third uncle, I'll accompany you into battle if you're forced to leave for it. The Tian Fa forest is a wonderful place for our family as far as I'm concerned. Jun Xie narrowed his eyes. You wish to come? I'm afraid that you'll also risk death in that case. However, what I'm mainly concerned about is. He then looked to his father. If Moxie and I were to leave for the forest, you'll be alone at home. Jun Zhangtian laughed gently. He won't take rash actions against me. Be at ease. Our Jun family hasn't lost the entirety of its power yet. Why else would he try to measure you beforehand? Jun Xie clapped his head. This child hadn't considered that angle. Jun Moxie smiled. I didn't expect that this matter would worry third uncle such much. The three men of the family had concluded their discussion. This solution to this situation was bound to be ever-changing. The three men felt that this matter hadn't gotten out of their hands yet. Especially the young Master Jun. He felt that he had solid grip on this matter. So, why would he worry? Moxie, can't you ease the training of those 300 guards a bit? They are getting very tired. It seems you're making them run before they're even qualified to walk. Jun Xie's expression was solemn as he raised this issue. Jun Moxie stared blankly for a while. Then, he slowly started to speak. Third uncle, I understand your concern, but my demands from their training are far from over. I'll only strengthen their training step by step. But I won't loosen it up. What I'll set up, and what I wish, is the strongest military force. Jun Xie was stunned. Is it necessary to continue with this sort of inhumane training? If I were to send anyone from that group to the battlefield at this moment, they would be nothing short of a standard slaughtering machine. Yet, he says that their training is far from finished. What kind of an abnormal squad does my nephew wish to train? And will those ordinary soldiers be able to hold up to that training? Meanwhile, those soldiers divided into different groups and advanced towards each other on the training field. Each man was sweating profusely. Each man was drenched in sweat. Jun Moxie had introduced an even tougher training regime ever since they had returned from the Tian Fa forest. He had doubled the intensity of their training and would make them work round the clock for 24 hours a day. The young Master Jun had been particular to the last detail. A sandbag was tied to each man's arms, hip bones and legs at present. The function of the sandbags was to add extra weight. They weren't even permitted to remove them when they were having a meal or going to sleep. Their training had become more strenuous with each passing day. It was like a struggle between life and death. An outsider would become extremely shocked if he saw this. It had ceased to resemble a fight between humans or a drill of regular soldiers. Rather, it appeared as if frantic beasts were madly tearing at each other. Everyone's eyes had an ominous glint, and a murderous aura radiated around them. It seemed that they were brimming with irreconcilable hatred towards their enemy, and were ensued in a battle of life and death. They had endured that brutal training the entire afternoon. The xian qi inside their bodies had become similar to an incense stick that was entirely burnt out. They were solely relying on their bodily strength and instinct as they battered each other and received blows in return at present. Not a single grain of dust remained on the Jun family's training field. Each and every inch of the training field had been irrigated with sweat and blood. The men had been repeatedly smashed into the ground. It would appear that even an iron hammer wouldn't be able to make a dent on the battlefield's surface. The whole field had a glossy texture to it. It was extremely terrifying to look at. The battle had come to its climax by the time Jun Moxie reached there. No man in that confrontation had any strength left. A soldier roared madly and threw himself at a large individual. He beat him ferociously with his fist and leg. The opposite party neither evaded the attacks nor did he yield. An unbearable bang sound emanated when the fist and the leg made contact with the man's body. Both men then tumbled backwards. Then, an explosive sound resonated as the both of them smashed onto the ground. Both soldiers then crawled back up and resumed their ferociously fight. It seemed like two giant rhinos were smashing into each other. The Jun family's pond had turned black. 10 huge iron cooking pots were stationed on its sides. These pots bubbled endlessly. The pots were being used to prepare the medicinal herbs. And some people were continuously pouring the liquid medicine into the pond once it was ready. After that, they'd add some water, and would continue to refine the medicine. Close to 100 soldiers soaked naked inside the pond. Their eyes were closed shut, and their expression was solemn and respectful. They weren't taking a bath. This was another kind of training. During this time, Jun Moxie would have each one of them to soak their bodies in that pool as the medicine was poured into it. The water from the pond was replaced every 3 days, and the medicine was replaced along with it. Therefore, these soldiers would soak their bodies in that medicinal pond every day after finishing their training in order to restore their health and rejuvenate by absorbing the medicines. The reason this was just another sort of training was the water in the pond was always on the verge of boiling point. But it wasn't enough to cook them alive. Also, the water contained precious medicinal herbs. It would replenish their energy and give nourishment to their bodies so that they could endure the harsh training. It was only natural that those soldiers would have to pay the corresponding price for availing that useful medicinal water. Therefore, the task of changing the medicinal water was done by them only. Moreover, this task wasn't allowed to encroach upon their training time. Jun Moxie's training methods couldn't merely be termed as cruel. Jun Xie was a harsh soldier, but when he looked at the plight of these soldiers, he felt that this training was somewhat inhumane. Jun Moxie hid on the sidelines. He observed every individual carefully. The young master would change the intensity of their training every day these days. And every day, the soldier would be amazed to discover that when they had barely adjusted to the training of one day, they were on the verge of death the next. Their limits were exceeded every time. They trained every day, and round the clock. And they continued to surpass their previous limits. Their bodily strength would increase every 2 days. And they would be pleasantly surprised to find that their xian qi level would also see a slight increase every few days. And, although the increase was somewhat marginal, it was still a remarkable increase when one considered the time it had happened in. This sort of speedy enhancement was simply shocking. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 294. Determination. The xian qi cultivation within the ranks of these soldiers wasn't very high. The best among them were at the peak of the gold xian, while the overwhelming majority were at the Silver Xian realm. However, each man's physical strength had reached hair-raising levels. 50 men stood in a row a little distance away. They had their hands to their sides in the horsed stance. They stood like that at the foot of the wall. Beside each man that stood in that stance was another one who held a stick in his hands. Each man on the side would gnash his teeth and brandish his stick with a whipping sound. He'd hit each and every part of the man who stood in the stance. The sound of impact was monstrous. It somewhat resembled that of beating a raw cowhide. However, none of the men receiving the beating showed any signs of pain on their face. Perhaps one's face would twitch a little, or maybe another one would frown slightly. However, they didn't show any other outward signs apart from these two things. They staunchly remained in their stance. They'd get beaten hundreds of times. Then, the men would pant heavily as they'd rise from the horse stance. They then stretched their neck, wrists and ankles in exercise. This would give rise to a loud pop. The noise was similar to the one that is issued when a firecracker is burst. Then, they'd take over the wooden sticks. And the men who were previously beating them assumed the horse stance with their hands drooping to their sides. Their muscles were as taut as a young dragon's. The sharp whistling sounds would be resumed. Only this time those who were getting beaten and those who were doing the beating had switched places. A command was given after they had finished their rounds. Then, the total of these 100 men would make their way to the training field in two orderly groups. The two groups would stand panting on the field where the previous group had been ordered to fight hand to hand. The two groups that had been fighting in the field would neatly organize themselves into two groups and would proceed to the foot of the wall. Then, they'd beat their partner and then get beaten themselves. Then, another command would be given, and the 100 men who had just taken the field would commence their horrible fist fight. Every fist and every leg would hit a vital point. Hit of the stomach, the throat, the temples, the back of the head, between the legs, behind the knee, every critical joint. The scene was hard to imagine as it is. But what would it take to withstand such a bitter beating again and again? However, the men had gotten used to it. They could resist each and every hit. They would try to pick out each and every possible crack in their opponent's defense. And if they fell into a trap, they'd try their hardest to maintain indifference by keeping their skin thick. Occasionally, one person would hit their opponent on the nose. This would cause a long stream of blood to gush out. However, their expression wouldn't change. They'd remain unfeeling, as if the man they had hit wasn't their comrade, but their enemy. Then, there would be a whistle. The men in the pond would come out, get dressed, and line up beside the pond. Meanwhile, the men on the field would stop, make their way to the pond in an orderly fashion, and enter the pool after undressing. The men who had just exited the pool would then start with an even harsher training. They wouldn't fight one-on-one this time. This round would be a hysterical beat-up where anything goes between the two groups. Maybe at one point it was one person taking on another one, or maybe at another time it would be many people confronting a single person. An individual could be surrounded by many others at one moment, and he could be part of a large group that surrounded another individual the next. The chaos of the scene was spectacular and indescribable. Many a times one could see a single individual lying on the ground and being ferociously stamped on the pit of his stomach and his lower abs. Then, the next moment, he could be seen flying out and hitting the people that surrounded him. Each man would fight with the vitality of a dragon and the ferociousness of a tiger in this crazy battle. In the entire course of events, besides the bossy battle commands and the war cries, no one would open their mouth to speak anything. They spoke using something else. They spoke using their fists, their legs, their elbows and even their shoulders. The three groups of men were cycled in this manner. These men were supposedly playing the role of their comrades' training partners. However, this was mere the daytime training schedule. They would undergo Xian Qi training in the evening. This training session would be accompanied by something even more brutal than what they'd endured during the daytime, an arms drill. Each individual would gnash their teeth and put their very soul and consciousness into the training. They only had one aim in their minds. I must meet the young master's standards. This was because the young master had told them that their final inspection was upon them. They would be removed from the squad if they were to fail the assessment. Then, these so-called defaulters would be reassigned to residence guards and kitchen staff. After tasting the sweetness of steady and rapid progress, after seeing a clear hope of becoming a powerful expert, none of them wanted to return to their former decadent life. It would be a matter of grave shame for them. These steeled troops were like phoenixes that had attained nirvana after a deadly ordeal, and were now waiting to take form again. Jun Moxie's eyes were unfeeling and ruthless as he oversaw the harsh training on the field. His posture was calm and steady. He didn't intend to stop at that. He would use his unique medicines on these soldiers once they had attained the highest limits of their strengths. The medicine would show its best results then, and everyone's efficacy would shoot up. Jun Moxie would assign these troops the specific task of slaughter in the future. Just slaughter. Uninterrupted slaughter. Unending slaughter. Grandpa Jun and Jun Wuyi stood side by side on top of the high tower of the Jun residence. Their eyebrows twitched for a moment as they saw the cruelty of the training that was taking place below. Wuyi, you see the training he's giving them. What do you think he plans to do with them? Why would he train them like this? Grandpa Jun's vision seemed heavy. Such training would make these soldiers the master of the enemy combatant's life. They soldiers may or may not be able to defeat the enemy on their own, but I think that Moxie is training with a sole purpose in mind: slaughter. Jun Wuyi spoke with a greedy expression on his face. It was only natural that any general would wish to covet such troops after he had laid his eyes on them. In fact, it would have been extremely absurd if Jun Wuyi didn't feel envious of this squad's abilities. Such a squad would be a part of any general's dream army. Forget 300, even 100 of these soldiers could make a general's army unstoppable. That army would be unbeatable and invincible. Nothing would be able to stop such an army. They would become the enemy's nightmare. Slaughter. Jun Zhantien looked anxious. Even if they are being trained to slaughter, the important questions would be for whom would they slaughter, and for what reason they'd slaughter for. This question is very important when you keep the other people of this country in your perspective. This child would beg to differ from his father's words. This child believes that no matter what, these troops would find it fulfilling to fight for only one person. Jun Wuyi lowered his gaze coldly. These 300 men would fight only for Moxie. For Moxie and the Jun family. The future of our Jun family rests on Moxie's shoulders. So, what importance would the other people of this country hold? This kind of strength, Grandpa Jun didn't seem any less worried, will attract a lot of jealousy and suspicion once it's revealed to the people. Jealousy and suspicions? Why? Jun Wuyi's eyes narrowed. A sharp and cold ray of light passed through them. When has the Jun family ever been involved in misconducts? And hasn't the Jun family always supported the people? Jun Wuyi's line of thought was beginning to get influenced by Jun Moxie's. He didn't sound like himself. The old man sighed. Did I really make the right decisions in those days? Our Jun family's talent has withered. Should I also take on some responsibilities? With Jun Moxie, our Jun family will rise quickly. No power will be able to hold us back. I'm confident about this fact. Jun Xie then turned his neck to look at the tussle taking place on the training field. He then slowly continued. However, we need time and strength to achieve that goal. We need absolute strength. And now we already have a prototype of that strength. Jun Xie clenched his fists. The sounds of his joints clicking echoed. Didn't that little brat Xie say that he'd oversee this training? So, why can't I even see his shadow? Grandpa Jun looked around. The training of these men doesn't require anyone's supervision, Jun Xie stated. His eyes were full of admiration. This training has reached amazing levels. And as for Jun Xie, I don't know where he is or what he's up to. However, we shouldn't try to control him. He can take care of himself. We shouldn't worry about him. Father, he's a hidden dragon. We should give him a free hand. You think that we shouldn't worry about him? You think everything is fine. Then, you're not behaving like an uncle should. This isn't enough. Xie isn't that young anymore. Aren't you concerned about his marriage? Weren't you the one to witness his growth that day? So, how would I know if he's old enough to take a wife yet? By the way, how's his asset? Good enough? Jun Xie asked in a lofty manner. It is really good. In fact, he has surpassed this old man's paragon from the old days. Bah! You brat! What are you saying? Do you want a spanking? Grandpa Jun suddenly came to himself and raised his hand. He desired to teach his son a lesson. The third master chuckled. Why are you angry, Dad? Aren't you happy that Xie has grown up? It's just that when it comes to marriage, he'll certainly take his time to make a decision. However, if you plan to force him into do something he doesn't want to, I won't have any objections. Rather, I'd be glad to see it happen. Facing my sons is like facing an army. Grandpa Jun found himself in a knot as he thought about it. He realized that he may not be able to convince his precious grandson to act against his will in the most trivial of matters, let alone a topic as important as marriage. That little Duga girl is good to Xie. And I see that Xie also finds her interesting. Is there anyone else? I can't stand that girl for Xie. Jun Xie asked. He seemed unwilling to resign himself. There was nothing dignified about this. The father and son had started to create a harem for their grandson/nephew. Apart from this, Xie used to wander around the Spirit Fog Lake. Maybe there's someone there. Jun Xie winked. Jun Xie almost fainted. He had to use his hand to support himself. Is there anything else besides that? I remember that. Xie would seem very ambitious about Qing Han. Jun Xie dashed past and flew out the open window the moment he finished speaking those words. Even his shadow didn't linger behind. He knew what awaited him if he had stayed any longer. You bastard! Get out from my sight! Jun Xie flipped out in rage. However, he realized that his son had already disappeared without a trace. So, he had no choice but to open his eyes wide, stamp his feet and roar down the tower. However, he suddenly stopped his roar in between, and started to ponder pensively. Would our Jun family have to wait for a long time? He let out a long sigh and shook his head. That's absurd. That's completely absurd. The old man had no other words apart from absurd. Jun Xie was on the sidelines of the training field when he heard the faint sound of his grandfather's roar. He couldn't help but be muddled with confusion. Why is Grandpa shouting? Who ignited the fire this time? Young Master Jun was unaware that he was the reason behind his grandfather's anger, even though he was entirely innocent in reality. Jun Moxie's body disappeared from the sidelines of the training field without a trace. Jun Moxie looked at the sky and figured that it would night soon. His heart was full of anticipation. He was about to deal with a lot of important matters that night. First was that accessory worn by Silver Blizzard City's Xiao Fengwu. It was indeed a spectacular item. How could an ordinary piece of jewelry invoke such a response from the Hongjun Pagoda? Young Master Jun was unaware of that accessory's origins. However, it didn't matter whether he knew about it or not. He had nevertheless devised a plan, and was quite certain of returning with that item. Next was the assassination of his assassin. Jun Moxie had the highest level of interest in that matter. Not only did Jun Moxie like that man's execution style, he highly approved of them. That person didn't even look back after his head-on strike didn't bear fruit. Instead, he escaped far and wide. And he didn't do a sloppy job at that either. The man left behind no trace. This was the same technique which the hitman Jun had employed in his previous life. This man was the only one Jun Moxie could consider a true assassin in this world. The other groups of assassins he had confronted in this world were no more than good Xian experts. Did they possess an assassin style? Those people don't deserve the tag of an assassin. Moreover, that assassin was in possession of an extremely fast and unique technique. Jun Moxie's killing ability would shoot up like a whirlwind if he were able to obtain that skill. Then, he could even hope to kill a spirit Xian expert by staging an ambush for the same. There must be some mystery behind his speed. Jun Moxie hid in nothingness till he approached his own small courtyard. His train of thought stopped and he stared blankly in confusion upon seeing two figures up ahead. There were two figures at the entrance of his courtyard. They were small and frail. They were kneeling on the ground. Their backs were straight. It was impossible to guess how long they had been kneeling like this. However, they seemed stubborn and unwilling to stop. Jun Moxie sighed as his demonic and shadowless figure slowly walked past them. These two were among the many children he and his uncle had rescued from the donghua hall. The rest of the children had been relocated to good places. However, these two children had refused to leave for the life of them. They only desired to learn the skills they'd need to extract their revenge. Their disabilities couldn't be regarded as very serious. However, they were both mute. Their tongues had been cut into half. They would never speak again. Moreover, one of them had only one arm left. It wasn't that Jun Moxie's heart hadn't been moved by their perseverance. However, he had reluctantly rejected them after an examination. These kids had astonishing willpower, and their hatred towards their enemy would also be helpful. However, their aptitude was mediocre, to say nothing of the fact that they had become physically handicapped. The donghua hall hadn't abandoned the prospect of their cultivation for no reason. Jun Moxie had wholeheartedly considered training the two children at one point. He figured that he could use his harsh training methods to suit their tenacious wills. They could show significant progress in just over a decade as long as they were willing to endure the cruel training and have an old-fashioned baptism by fire. In fact, they'd even have a chance at reaching the Earth Xian realm. Earth Xian level could never be considered meager. An ordinary person would struggle his whole life to attain it. It was a very high goal for an ordinary person to look up to. However, this target had no meaning in the eyes of the young master and these kids. However, could Jun Moxie afford to train them? He'd have to spend lots of time and money on their training and rehabilitation. Moreover, it would be a great waste if their progress were to stop at the Earth Xian realm. Therefore, Jun Moxie had considered the topic for a long time, and had then decided that the prospect of their cultivation wasn't worth the effort. Moreover, their strong desire for revenge wouldn't help in reaping any short-term results. Therefore, it didn't have any significance. Jun Moxie sympathized with them. In fact, he secretly praised their willpower. But he had realized that it wasn't meant to be. However, those two children were seen kneeling outside his courtyard ever since he had refused to train them. They could not speak, but their eyes would implore Jun Moxie whenever they'd see him. It was already the 9th day since they had been kneeling at the entrance of his courtyard. Their slender bodies trembled as they heard the familiar sound of Jun Moxie's footsteps. They straightened their backs even more, though they still remained motionless in that kneeling position. The young Master Jun sighed as he slowly walked to stand in front of them. "Look up and look at me," his voice was a command they couldn't defy. Their bodies trembled as they looked up to face Jun Moxie in accordance with his command. Jun Moxie was startled. Those two must be around 13 or 14 years in age. However, their eyes no longer showed the same longing and urgency of the past few days. That expression had been replaced by deathly stillness. However, it wasn't exactly an empty sort of deathly stillness. Rather, it was one where they had disregarded life and death. It was the deathly still of an individual who had disregarded the mortal world. That deathly stillness wasn't synonymous with emptiness. Jun Moxie sighed inside. These are the eyes of a top-notch killer. One could only bring out this expression in their eyes once they had been oppressed to an extreme degree, and had begun to consider human life as worthless. In fact, such people considered their own life to be worthless. If their natural endowments had been any better, as long as it was even a little bit better, Jun Moxie would have accepted them without hesitation. However, he was helpless at that point of time. Their natural endowments were too substandard. It required 1% insight and 99% sweat to become formidable. However, that 1% insight was the key. It was more important than the remaining 99% sweat. "Tell me your reasons. Show me the extent of your determination." Jun Moxie's heart felt pity. These two children had suffered a lot. A normal person couldn't even imagine their suffering. Their hearts were filled with hatred towards their enemy, but they didn't have any aptitude to practice martial arts. Therefore, Jun Moxie couldn't help but sigh. Determination? The two children looked at each other. Then, they nodded heavily in unison. The child on the left slowly extended the finger of his remaining hand to his mouth. He then bit down on it resolutely. The kid bit with considerable effort, and tilted his head to the side until he had torn off a chunk of his own flesh. A river of blood rushed out from that finger. His entire body shivered with pain, and his face had gone deathly. However, he was otherwise motionless. The child then started to write a character on the ground with the flow of his own blood. He had only written about half of it when the blood flow slowed down. The boy looked at it in an unsatisfied manner. He then brought his finger to his mouth again. He desperately and ferociously bit down on it again as he tore out some more flesh. A small piece of finger's bone was also pulled out. The white mix of flesh and bone fell down. A fountain of blood shot out. The fountain of blood gushed out far, and some of it was even spilt on Jun Moxie's face. The other child mimicked the first one, and bit into his finger as well. The two children's bodies shivered, yet they maintained control over themselves as the blood gushed out. The children then drew big and straight characters on the ground. The child on the left wrote, "I will kill them by hacking them down. I will have no regrets till I die." The child on the right wrote, "Those who aren't powerful can only die. Nothing more." Their words contained power. The two of them were trembling with pain, But they wrote each character meticulously and with a lot of effort. The two children kneeled facing Jun Moxie after they had finished writing and knocked their heads heavily on the ground. Jun Moxie's eyes suddenly turned red. He felt a strange feeling in his heart. His heart had started to tremble ferociously. Jun Moxie had conducted himself with cold-blooded apathy in both his lives. He had never been benevolent and looked at all living things as mowed grass or lowly dogs. He was numb inside and thought nothing of the common people. He hadn't felt the least bit disturbed when he had witnessed the horrors of the donghua hall that day. He wasn't shaken at all. However, the stubborn acts of these two youngsters had moved him very deeply. Good. If this is how you feel, I will not be miserly to present you the opportunity. Jun Moxie took a long breath. The color of his eyes became milder as he continued in a sinking voice. The opportunity one shall provide might grant you the power to rule over the heaven and earth someday. However, it is important that you remember that such a path is full of killing and death. I hope that you will not disappoint me. The two children looked up in unison. They couldn't speak, but their eyes were full of ecstasy. Then, that ecstasy was suddenly replaced by unwavering determination. It seemed that they had made the decision from the bottom of their souls. They looked at Jun Moxie and knocked their heads on the ground. One of the heads got injured, and blood started to stream out from it. Jun Moxie quickly took the children into his arms and flew inside. He nearly burst through the entrance. These two had suffered a lot of pain to demonstrate their determination. They hadn't made any noise to reveal their pain, but they'd be in a lot of trouble if they weren't administered a timely medical treatment. This could turn into a very big problem. Jun Moxie had already decided to help them. So, he wasn't going to let another mishap happen to them again. They possessed such great willpower. They may not have much aptitude, but wouldn't their immense willpower make up for it? The number of people who possessed the necessary aptitude were the same as the number of sand perches on this land. But how many people had such a strong willpower? What would natural talent achieve if one didn't have the desire? When a person could be so fierce in dealing with themselves, how would they deal with their enemy? Two phrases had been smeared in blood at the entrance of the courtyard. The words within these phrases dazzled brightly. I will kill them by hacking them down. I will have no regrets till I die. Those who aren't powerful can only die. Nothing more. The curtain of darkness hooded the sky. Jun Moxie frowned and pondered deeply as he looked at the two thin and weak figures that lay on his bed. His residence was full of wounded people. There was a thick scent of medicine in the air. Yi Gu Han lay tranquilly on the giant bed on the side. His breathing was faint, but he was free from danger. Jun Moxie had tidied up another bed on the side. It had been taken over by those two children at that moment. 3 wounded people. 3 crippled individuals. Those two youngsters had stretched their vitalities to the limit. They had fainted right after Jun Moxie had promised to help them. However, they had fainted noiselessly. They hadn't even issued a groan. Jun Moxie had seen many fierce people. However, this was the first he had seen someone with such a strong base in terms of ferocity, and none with relation to martial arts. Will these little devils turn out fiercer than me? Since I've promised to help them, how can I train up these talentless individuals in the shortest amount of time? Jun Moxie was completely clueless in this regard. With Xianqi? No. This method won't do. The donghua hall wouldn't have stuffed them into those giant jars if they had any aptitude for Xianqi practice. That's it for that angle. Jun Moxie suddenly stood up. There was an ominous glint in his eyes. At worst, I can teach them my previous life's core law. I'll train them in accordance to the standards I practiced in those days. And as for how much they can advance, it will depend on their luck. And I should be able to refine a cleaning essence, Dan, if I'm able to ascend to the 4th level of art of unlocking the heavens' fortune. I'll personally train these two into something which would shock the entire Xian continent. They would eventually be capable of killing the gods of this continent. With their willpower, my core law and Dan medicine, these two terrifying demons would rise like the stars. Jun Moxie left the room gently and sat on the threshold. He looked up at the night sky. His train of thought was long, and a lot of time had passed by the time it ended. The stubbornness of those two youngsters had evoked his own past in his mind. Wasn't I the same as those two in my previous life? I used to play with my life. I would push myself to my limits in training. How many times did I pass out from the shock of pain? How many times did I push myself to the point of death? In what way had Jun Xie's unrivaled reputation come about? Who knew how much effort, sweat and tears of blood had been invested into his reputation? His fellow apprentices were trying their hardest, but his training had exceeded their difficulty by 3 times. Any man who desired success and unrivaled fame had to be very fierce with himself. Facing the enemy with ferocity was nothing, being fierce with oneself was important. A true assassin would never care about his life or his accomplishments. Worrying about capabilities brings harm. The worry of one's mind would act as an obstacle. These were the words of his previous life's master. An image of a face floated in front of Jun Moxie. It was a face which was black as iron and cold as ice. Murderous aura emanated from its eyes. However, he felt relieved whenever those two eyes would look at him. However, Jun Moxie could feel the presence of those eyes even though he tried to dodge them. Those eyes were full of nothingness. It was as if they had passed through the 2 worlds and were gazing at him from the distance. He shivered in their cold just as in the past, but it felt auspicious and peaceful. Master. Jun Moxie had lowered his head and covered his knees with his hands in sadness. A door opened, and a ray of light escaped from that crack. It painted Jun Moxie's silhouette. His silhouette curled up as it shivered in the night wind. It was somewhat lonely. Power, was it worth yearning for? He heard light footsteps behind him, and then felt a warm overcoat cover his body. Jun Moxie remained as motionless as before, and asked, "Tell me, little Ku, do you wish to become a powerful individual?" "Ah," the little girl cried in alarm. This was clearly unexpected. Become powerful? What use will that be? What use will that be? That's an interesting question. If you become someone like the old solitary falcon, you can kill whomever you want to kill. You can live in this world free and unfettered. Don't you wish such a life? Jun Moxie asked heavily. The little girl walked to his side and calmly sat down beside him. She then tilted her head and placed her hands on her cheeks to support it. The girl then looked up at the moon and started to ponder earnestly. The moonlight sprinkled on her face. It brought out a somewhat beautiful and gentle flavor to her face. A little time passed. Then, the little girl smiled shyly and said, "Powerful. I don't want to become that kind of a person." "Oh. Why?" Jun Moxie tilted his head and looked at the little girl. Little Ku's words came very unexpectedly to him. According to Hitman Jun's view of the world, any person would answer in the affirmative if they were provided an opportunity to become a powerful individual. It didn't matter what they did afterwards to achieve it. Little Ku lowered her head shyly and started to gently nip at her nails. "Young master, I don't know what it would feel like to be a strong person. But I don't think, perhaps I'll enjoy the attention and the praise. But I don't know why, but I don't want it. I'm only a little girl. Young master's little girl. All I want is to take care of the young master every day. I look forward to washing young master's clothes, make food for young master, and wait for him to return when he has gone out. I just want to be an ordinary maid. The little girl smiled shyly again and spoke. Young master, do these words mean that I don't have any spirit? But I really don't want to become strong. No, what you said. I really like it. You're an adorable little girl who I'm very fond of. Jun Xie carefully looked at the little girl who sat beside him for the first time. The moonlight shone on her skin. Her white blonde hair was tied in a bun, and the loose silky strands danced in the wind. Her long eyelashes blinked, and there was a tuft of hair sticking to the skin beside her ear. The little girl felt a bit uneasy since she was being seized up by Jun Xie. She twisted her fingers, but pretended to not notice. However, her heart was jumping madly inside her chest. Her face slowly turned red as she lowered her head. She felt like a deer inside her heart. Jun Xie's face reveled in an interesting smile as he felt his mind relax. His heart felt at ease upon having such a pleasant little girl beside him. He unexpectedly felt a faint yet heartfelt happiness. Everyone had their own way of living. This was the least one could do without a problem. Like the little girl, her dream was very simple, practical and very warm. He caressed her beautiful hair softly and said, "You hurry up to your room and go to sleep." Jun Xie was astonished to find that his voice had been very gentle. He felt like he was facing the daughter of his previous life's master. Yes. The little girl answered as she lowered her head. She stood up slowly. She could feel her cheeks getting warmer. It was like her entire body lacked strength as she slowly walked to her room. She walked 2 steps before she thought of something, and then turned around to say, "Young master, you'll go to sleep early, huh?" She found that the young master, who was just sitting beside her a moment ago, had disappeared without a trace by the time she had turned her head. He's very quick. The little girl bit her lip and smiled shyly again. She then pursed her mouth and raised her head as she remembered what had happened earlier that morning. This made her cover her face. "I am thinking nonsense." Jun Xie welcomed the night wind. He didn't even leave a shadow as he flew fast. He could feel the art of unlocking the heavens' fortune revolving inside of him. Each cycle brought about a large surge of formidable strength in him. There was an unstoppable tendency of qi flowing through his meridians. He felt extremely satisfied at that moment. The first target was the magnificent jewel hall. Jun Xie painstakingly restrained his own aura. He floated silently for a while, and then submerged underground. The young Master Jun then used his spirit sense to search each and every inch of the land ahead as it slowly spread out. Jun Xie hadn't forgotten how he had nearly been discovered by Lei Wubei the last time. He knew that there were at least 3 spirit Xian experts inside the magnificent jewel hall. So how could he act carelessly? Being cautious and prudent was a top character requirement for an assassin. However, the result of his spirit senses probe greatly alarmed him. When did the magnificent jewel hall have so many experts? This was quite a terrifying strength. Jun Xie had searched every corner of the magnificent jewel hall. There were several powerful people in the magnificent jewel hall. Some of them were clearly at the spirit Xian realm, while the others were at least at the peak of the sky Xian. He could sense 7 powerful individuals. There were 2 weaker people as well. They must be Xiao Han and Mu Shuetong. When did so many powerful experts fall from the sky? Are they possibly the reinforcements from the Silver Blizzard City? And Jun Moxie's spirit sense detected a very formidable presence in the center. It must be a spirit Xian expert. There was one amongst them, who, although wasn't as strong as Solitary Falcon, but wasn't very weak in comparison. In fact, he was nearly as strong as the Great Master. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and another one. There were 6 other spirit Xian experts present there. Jun Moxie felt himself getting drenched in sweat. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 295. Xiao family's plans and arrangements. 6 spirit Xian experts, 7 sky Xian peak experts, and 2 sky Xian mid-level experts. This was a very frightful force from the Tianxiang city's standards. Why did the Silver Blizzard City send so many experts? Jun Moxie but could think of an answer to this question. This force had been assembled to deal with the Jun family. Who else could it be for? They had mobilized this force since one of the 8 great masters, the Solitary Falcon, had taken residence with the Jun family. If such power was coordinated properly, it could be used to defeat the Solitary Falcon. Jun Moxie carefully controlled his yin-yang escape and entered the building. Then, he silently hid himself in the ground. He couldn't focus on his main target at this time since it was of paramount importance to understand the true objectives of those experts from the Silver Blizzard City. He would learn their true objectives, and then quickly devise some countermeasures to neutralize the enemy's strength. Otherwise, the consequences of this situation would be very troublesome. He hadn't expected that his moment of greed would reward him with such important information. Jun Moxie sighed from his underground location. Man, my greed is very rewarding. Would I have stumbled upon this information if I hadn't followed after my greed? Didn't I just stumble upon the proverbial pie in the sky? The heavens favor the good. This young master's good actions substitute the heavens' justice. I punish the wicked, and so my good deeds pave a bridge to my success. Would the heavens strongly favor this young master if I hadn't done noble deeds? Humph. Humph. What for? Don't tell me that wretched cripple is acting up again. I think it's best to take this opportunity and destroy the very roots of this disease. Otherwise we'll have to deal with a prolonged problem. Not much could be determined from the voice. However, it seemed to be full of resentment and defiance. Therefore, the speaker must have been Xiao Han. Such impudence. We're from the upper echelons of the Silver Blizzard City. Yet, you dare to question our word? It seems that you can't distinguish between our ranks. A somewhat gentle voice scolded. Would we be in such a mess if it weren't for a devil like who willfully started a fire and fanned the flames? The Silver Blizzard City situation had been tumbled by your actions. If the Dongfang family hadn't acted out, killed our members, and diverted the public anger, I'm afraid that the Supreme Alliance itself would have tried to meddle in that affair. And your willful actions would have been the root cause of that chaos. And you're still resigned to the destruction of the Silver Blizzard City? Can the insignificant Jun family ever destroy the Silver Blizzard City? Why are you blaming me for this, grandfather? How did start any trouble? He tried to steal my wife. He started this animosity between us. Please tell me, which man on earth could ever stand this insult? Xiao Han asked somewhat emotionally. Grandfather? Xiao Han's grandfather? Isn't he the topmost individual in the Silver Blizzard City Xiao family? However, he didn't know whether that person was Xiao Xingyun or Xiao Buyu. The young Master Jun held his breath and stayed calm. He remained motionless as he continued to eavesdrop. Hitman Jun carefully listened to all sorts of voices, whether loud or faint, without any exception or negligence. But you've already destroyed the 4 important members of the Jun family, and the backbone of their power. And Jun Xie was crippled because of a devil like you. What more do you want? Do you intend to show no kindness to the dogs and the chicken in their family? The gentle voice scolded with some resentment and disappointment. And what of the present circumstances? The Shui Han Manor and Shichang Xiao have issued a joint summon. Is that trivial to you? We should be hurrying towards the south. And now you, little devil, are delaying us with your quarrel over a nonsensical grudge. I have to admit, this person's way of dealing with matters is impressive. At least Xiao Han can't stand up to it. Now that you mentioned that matter, I've remembered another one. These 2 matters are somewhat related. I request grandfather to pay heed. Xiao Han's spirits seemed to rise. We received a small scroll when we were at the Imperial Palace today. There was very little content on it. It said that Jun Xie would lead the army which would go south to confront the Xian Beast Uprising. Grandfather, it would be better if we employing common soldiers to deal with the Xian Beast Uprising? The gentle voice suddenly paused, as if in contemplation. Then it spoke again. Ah! Good, if this is the case, then this is truly an opportunity, perhaps. Second brother, that scroll does present us with an opportunity. But we must remember the summon. They've called all the great masters to arms. This means that the solitary falcon may go south. And in all probability, he would be accompanying Jun Xie throughout the journey. The solitary falcon won't be easy to deal with even if we can handle Jun Xie with ease. Then, the problem will continue to go around in circles. Therefore, I beseech the second brother to focus only on solitary falcon. He's the core of our problems. Second brother? It seems like it's the Xiao family's second in hierarchy, Xiao Buyu. You're right. That old solitary falcon deserves a corresponding reply since he has decided to stick his head out. How could we back away from avenging the 6th brother? Xiao Buyu's gentle voice was brimming with killing intent. We'll wait for an ideal opportunity when we get to the south. First, the 6 of us and the 7 swords we 13 will coordinate and kill the solitary falcon. Then, we can decide whether we need to tidy up Jun Xie or not. In any case, everything will become clear to us once we get rid of the solitary falcon. In fact, we can easily finish this matter given that area's natural threat once we've suppressed the Xian Beast's uprising. So, the second brother is suggesting that we wait and deal with this matter after the Xian Beast's uprising is handled? It was an old and familiar sound. Jun Moxie listened to it, and determined that it belonged to the 3rd elder. That's right. Every great master has been summoned this time. So, if we make a move and attack a great master before the matter in the south is taken care of, I fear the rest of the great masters would attack the Silver Blizzard City in return. Therefore, we'll handle him after this situation is taken care of. Xiao Buyu spoke with a dark mental frame. Besides, there's that matter of the origins and abilities of that black-clothed, masked man. Xiao Buyu spoke in an even gentler manner. He snatched our Xiao family's soul, replenishing Jade despite our status. He'll understand its importance soon. Then, he'll become aware of the Jade being worn by Feng Wu. So, he'll come to snatch it as well. This will happen because Feng Wu will be alone. We'll make it as convenient for him as possible. He smiled darkly again. There may be a chance of casualties if the Jade is in possession of an elder. So, we can't risk it. However, Feng Wu will be an easy target. and he's unlikely to feel threatened. Therefore, he won't harm the boy. This old man has already mastered the divine inhibition. I can lock onto his soul's scent for 500 kilometers. Xiang's son will remain on standby at all times. Therefore, he won't be able to escape us once he has stolen the jade. We'll find him even if he escapes to the ends of the earth. Then, we can concentrate our strength, catch up with him, and resolve the matter in one fell swoop. We'll be able to retrieve both the soul-replenishing jades this manner. Good idea, second brother. Everyone's spirit rose when they heard the plan. However, Jun Moxie was stunned. That's their plan? They've conceded so easily? It had to be said that this plan of Xiao Buyu's would have been very effective in dealing with anyone. Even Yun Bichen wouldn't be able to see through it. However, it was worthless in Jun Moxie's eyes. This plan seemed like a honey trap, but it was being used on a castrated man. This analogy sounds vulgar, but the result of the matter would justify it. Suddenly, many elders cried in alarm. Second brother, you can use the divine inhibition? Have you stepped into the fourth level of the spirit Xian realm? He. Xiao Buyu's voice clearly revealed his complacence. I'm ashamed that it took nearly 10 years to make this breakthrough. However, this is the reason why I'm confident that I'll be able to capture that mysterious, masked man. Congratulations on the remarkable feat, second brother. Everyone spoke in unison. However, Jun Moxie laughed in his heart. Confidence? You speak of confidence in front of this young master? How can you behave like that? Your divine inhibition is limited to 500 kilometers. That's worth a fart to this young master. Ahem, no one is to allow any information out if we're able to deal with the Jun family successfully, understood? Power radiated from Xiao Buyu's eyes as he looked around. That's obvious. Otherwise, the lord of the city will blame everyone, and the consequences will be very unpleasant. Besides, the Jun family has the Dongfang family behind them. So, everyone will carry out their tasks stealthily. Everybody chuckled as they discussed this. This made Jun Moxie very angry. This Xiao family is very malevolent. This young master will see who exterminates whose roots when we're all in the south. Second brother. About this matter with the Xian beasts. It's apparently a very unusual occurrence. Is it possible that the kings of the Tianfa forest have decided to meddle in this matter? How can there be such a huge commotion otherwise? Every great masters has been summoned. Second brother. Which 8 great masters do you reckon will answer to this summon? This was the voice of the 9th elder. That isn't very difficult to judge. No one has seen tracks of Yun Bichen for many years. I'm afraid it'll be the same this time around. And then, the great blue master Mang Hongchen lives too far from the Tianfa forest. He most probably won't be able to go even if he receives the news on time. However, the cold-blooded master Lei Wu Bei and the solitary falcon will go for sure. After all, they're right here in Tianxiang City. They won't be able to turn their backs even if they wanted to. Also, the one who gave these supreme summonses, Shi Chang Xiao, is already at the Xuan manor. Li Ju Tian will probably return to his manor since this threatens his family the most. I roughly estimate that 4 out of the 8 great masters will go. As for the Silver Blizzard City, we will go and represent our lord. And perhaps we'll be the most powerful in the terms of comprehensive strength. And as for Great Master Wen Tian, I cannot say. He may go, or he may not go. But I think the strength of this tyrannical gathering will be enough to deal with the Xian Beast Uprising even without Master Wen Tian's addition. Xiao Buyu's smile exhibited great confidence. It's just that this Xian Beast Uprising is very strange. Some say that they are directly attacking the Xuan manor. Second brother. I don't recall the Tianfa forest and the Xuan manor having any cause for quarrel. The third elder frowned. There must be a reason behind the Xian beast's decision to leave Tianfa and attack the Xuan manor. We'll get to know this after we've arrived there. Xiao Buyu spoke faintly. The look in his eyes showed that he didn't desire to discuss it further. Everyone was silent. Everyone was confused about the reason behind the Xian beast's uprising. However, stationed underground, Jun Moxie had a rough idea as to why. The young master Jun smiled bitterly. If I've guessed it right, I may have a lot to do with this Xian beast's uprising. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 296. The Xian Beast Uprising in the South. Jun Moxie remembered putting the condition in front of Long Crane and Big Bear if they were able to cause a ruckus at the Xuan manor and break the legs of its young master, then he'd help them advance in their cultivation and break through their bottlenecks. This would be their reward for dealing with the Xuan manor. They had said that they would take half a month to complete their task. But he had relaxed the time limit to 1 month. He had anticipated that they'd finish the task in a very short period of time since they had spoken about it in a very easygoing manner. However, he had received no information about them for a while. Therefore, he had started to feel strange. And now there's this sudden Xian beast uprising. Who apart from those two guys could be behind this? I had merely requested them to put a temporary check on the Xuan manor. I never asked them to act so aggressively. And now the situation is on the brink of a war. How are these two things the same? This matter remained a mystery to Jun Moxie, no matter how much he racked his brains over it. There's a lot at stake here. Didn't those two realize this? But why did they do this? Did they have some other reason behind it? Jun Moxie admittedly didn't know much about the Xian beast uprising. Those two Tianfa King Xian beasts had left him extremely gloomy at the prospect of venturing south. The heavens' plans supersede our own. It had seemed that dealing with the experts of the Xuan manor wasn't a big thing for those two Xian beasts. Moreover, they didn't need to confront the enemy head-on. They were merely required to stir up some trouble. That would have been enough. However, they hadn't anticipated that their appearance in the Tianxiang city would alert Shi Xiao, the master of life and death. After the fray for the Xian core had come to an end, Shi Xiao had left southwards for the Xuan manor to make inquiries regarding the same. The King Xian beasts had come out of the Tianfa forest. How could this be a trivial matter? The Tianfa forest was located near the Xuan manor. Therefore, it would have been curious if the Xuan manor hadn't been alerted when the King Xian beasts had left the Tianfa forest. Then, another curious coincidence had taken place. The heavenly master Li Ju Tian was in the process of making his return to the Xuan manor after getting tired to his travels. What should certainly be happening, and what shouldn't have happened had coincidentally happened at the same time. This had given rise to a large-scale commotion. Long Crane and Big Bear had rushed over to the Xuan manor. They had decided to carry out Jun Moxie's request very energetically. So, they arrogantly kicked down the manor's gate and stormed in. They first ransacked the entire place, and then beat up the resident experts. They had stopped once they had caused enough trouble to mark the end of the first request. Then, they had decided to proceed towards the second one. They started to look for the young master of the manor since they needed to break his legs. They had planned to grab the youngster, spank his buttocks, and leave the manor. How would the Xuan manor respond to this? Their so-called lord would be disgraced because of this. Those two King Xian beasts possessed supreme cultivation, and their bodies were absurdly strong. The Xuan Manor had many spirit Xian experts and numerous sky Xian experts. But these two powerful sides weren't a suited opposition for each other. A master is a master and a king is a king. Big Bear and Long Crane were like two tigers in a flock of sheep. Those two fought in high spirits and didn't hold anything back. They were very proud of their origins and firmly believed that they could even confront a great master on their own. Therefore, they took advantage of the chaos, entered the Xuan Manor, brought down the eastern wall, and set fire to the western side. The spirit Xian experts of the Xuan Manor were obviously enraged by this. However, they were unable to deal with this threat since their strength was scattered in their numbers. They were beat up instead of being able to punish their infiltrators. The two of them were like ferocious monsters who took joy in causing chaos. However, they weren't able to enjoy themselves for long. The Master of Life and Death, Xiao, had earlier hurried to the Xuan Manor. He arrived in time, saw the situation, picked his opponent, and started to engage Big Bear. Meanwhile, the rest of the experts combined their strength to face Long Crane. The chaos paved the path to a huge battle, and the situation reversed very quickly. Long Crane and Big Bear were soon at a disadvantage. It wouldn't have mattered if the two King Xian beasts had decided to retreat at that point. Their task was by and large complete. However, they were both King Xian beasts. So, how could they lose face like that? They couldn't make their return so easily. How could they face the mysterious man who had promised to help them break through their bottlenecks when they hadn't yet carried out his task properly? They had nearly burned down a few houses. How could that be considered as wreaking havoc? Besides, they had specifically requested to break Li Tengyun's legs. However, they hadn't been able to spot him yet. Would they be able to fool that mysterious master so easily? One must say that those beasts were indeed quite genuine at heart. They had decided to loyally carry out the task that had been entrusted to them by the mysterious master. Xiao is just one guy, right? We'll come back tomorrow if we're defeated today. Then, we'll see who beats whom. Can it be that you humans have more endurance than us divine beasts? That's nonsense. Besides, those two Xian beasts possessed extremely tough skin. A powerful strike didn't make much difference to them. They had been surrounded, but they valiantly issued the battle cry, and effortlessly killed many more people. The Xian beasts then acted without any grace, and continued with their wanton destruction, while completely ignoring Xiao. Then, they retreated in order to catch their breaths, and returned the next morning to wreak more havoc. Those two Xian beasts had decided that they wouldn't give up till they had satisfactorily completed their mission. The two of them surely had a strong character ethic in that regard. However, this became a cause of grievance for the spirit Xian experts of Xuan Manor. There were many spirit Xian experts in the Xuan Manor, but they weren't always guarding the gate or the courtyard. And those two supremely powerful Xian beasts were repeatedly ambushing their east and west wings. Even a divine entity wouldn't be able to stop them. There were many experts who could take on these two on their own, but they weren't strong enough to keep up for long, let alone kill them. The experts were getting increasingly exhausted, while the spirits of the two Xian beasts continued to rise. The battles over these past few days had brought them much pleasure. Li Ju-tian returned to the manor in the middle of the chaos. Who could have imagined that the second great master would find himself enraged upon his return? He had only been out for a few years, but had come back to find his home under a siege. Everything within a radius of 300 meters of his manor was a complete mess. Things had been brought down here and there. And many things had been overturned. Is this really the Xuan manor? Is this what I had built so painstakingly over so many years? This looks like a refugee camp. Li Zhutian's enraged counterattack proved near fatal for those two King Xian beasts. The two King Xian beasts were extremely fierce and thoroughly enjoyed a tough fight, but they were no match for Li Zhutian. Moreover, they had used up their energies while trifling with their opponents earlier. They were extremely exhausted and weren't in their peak conditions. However, the two King Xian beasts were gifted with very tough bodies. They cooperated with each other and were momentarily able to cope up with Li Zhutian, albeit with difficulty. The final result of the battle, the two Xian beasts managed to escape after sustaining serious injuries, while the Xuan manor emerged victorious. However, it was a bit of an overstatement to call this a victory. Something that Li Zhutian had painstakingly built over half of his life lay nearly ruined. Many of his spirit Xian experts lay seriously injured. Li Zhutian had defeated the two Xian beast kings, but this victory could at best be regarded as a tragic one. However, Shurchang Xiao had paid them a visit. Their old master had returned, and the two King Xian beasts were nearly defeated. These factors became a cause for celebration. However, mishap reared its head again. That too on the very evening the celebration feast had been held. A horde of Xian beasts, spreading as far as the eye could see, arrived without any prior indication. Low level, middle level, high level, whatever one wouldn't expect, were there. What was even more frightening was that a massive pack of bloodthirsty Xian beast wolves charged at them like a surging wave. Moreover, the pack comprised of an uncountable number of Xian beast wolves. However, this massive pack of the Xian beast wolves acted very unlike them, and retreated after they had caused a lot of damage to the Xuan manor. In fact, the omnipresent beasts disappeared without a trace. They felt that their luck had favored them. Everyone had started to relax. However, at that very moment a massive horse of Tian Fa Forest's man-eating golden ants showed up. They weren't very lucky, in fact, they were quite unfortunate. They had barely been able to deal with these man-eating golden ants when all sorts of aerial Xian beasts started to attack them. It was said that there was no sun over the Xuan manor for 2 consecutive days. The two King Xian beasts hadn't taken their defeat very well, and had instigated a Xian beast uprising. This was no longer a matter of completing that mysterious master's task, this had turned into a matter of pride. The situation had turned very hostile. 2 King Xian beasts had been forced to turn their tail and flee after being suppressed by a man. Xian beasts had been defeated. How could they call themselves kings if they couldn't even avenge this defeat? Moreover, the Xuan manor's experts had cheered excessively when Li Zhutian had defeated the 2 King Xian beasts. Those two had been bullying them around for a few days, but had finally been chased away by their lord. These cheers had naturally been very unpleasant to the ears of the 2 King Xian beasts. A battle with Li Zhutian may not have killed those 2 King Xian beasts, but they nearly died from excessive rage after they heard the cheers of the Xuan manor's experts. Thus, the 2 King Xian beasts were angered and enraged. In fact, they had nearly pulled out their feathers in rage. Then, another unforeseen event took place in the Tian Fa forest, and that allowed these 2 King Xian beasts to become even more unscrupulous. It was the so-called situation where there's no tiger in the mountain, so the monkey becomes the king. Therefore, they took advantage of this situation. How could they be trusted to deal with bigger issues if they couldn't even deal with such a small task, right? Therefore, The Xian beast uprising arrived like a reckless storm and engulfed everything in its path. Even Li Ju Tian had no option but to retreat in the face of such strength. However, the two Xian beasts didn't accept that as the end. It seemed as if they were unwilling to let him be. It seemed that they'd exterminate them all. However, the two of them were only thinking one thing: "Old man, we just want you to hand over your son to us. We'll break his legs and leave. Don't you understand such a simple request? We won't shatter his legs, we'll break them very gently. You'll be able to fix him up in a couple of months. It's merely a formality we need to carry out for that mysterious master. It's such a simple request. Why are you trying to turn this into a death match?" Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 297. Femme Fatale. However, who was Li Ju Tian? He was second only to the most powerful great master, Yun Chen. So, wouldn't it be a problem in the future if he handed over his son under these circumstances? It wasn't that no one from either side came forward to negotiate, but every effort at negotiation was short-lived and failed miserably. So, each side started to attack in an increasingly vicious manner. Soon, the Xuan manor was completely exhausted and was about to be wiped out by the Xian beasts. It seemed that they'd become their meal, and later, their excrement. Therefore, Li Ju Tian and Shi Xiao had no choice but to issue a joint statement and summoned all Xian experts in the world to their aid. And that's how Jun Moxie and the others got to know about the prevailing situation. This matter had already turned into a big problem. Everyone was confused as to why such a thing was happening. They wondered as to what could have provoked those two King Xian beasts. They've taken up arms against the Xuan manor, but why? I don't understand. This question not only made everyone gloomy, but also made them feel victimized. Li Ju Tian and the others from the Xuan manor were very confused and angry. Whom did we provoke? Why has such a heavenly calamity befallen us? Who is behind all this? This is very strange. Li Ju Tian had asked Long Crane and Big Bear several times. Why? We've lived in peace for so many years. What's more, we've even had business dealings between us. So, why are you suddenly attacking us? Even if we have to fight, can you at least tell me the reason for it? Li Ju Tian's question wasn't unreasonable. In fact, it was a very fair question. Shouldn't there be a good reason for the two large forces to go to war? However, the two King Xian beasts were unable to answer him every time. Wouldn't it be wrong to tell him that we lost a bet to someone, and your Xuan manor is an eyesore to that person? So, we've had to come here to break your son's legs, nothing more. Wouldn't we lose a lot of face because of this? It would seem that we've reduced to the status of hired thugs, carrying out the orders of another person. Being interrogated like that made Big Bear lose his temper. Aren't you the second great master? And you dare interrogate us like that? Do you know who we are? Li Ju Tian didn't inquire further after Big Bear said those words. But the attacks from both parties became even more ferocious. In fact, if the Xian beasts were to retreat at this point, Li Ju Tian would follow them and raid the Tian Fa forest. Everyone was annoyed. Then, Big Bear came up with a classic line and spoke. Why not? You're not pleasing to my eyes. I've been watching your Xuan manor for a long time, and I think it needs a spanking. You had bullied the two of us that day, right? Now, we've come with so many beasts in order to bully you. How about it? Feking old bastard. You were more than 80 at the time, And yet you played with young women to make them beget you a son. Even if you aren't ashamed of this, your neighbor feels extremely embarrassed. So, I've decided to teach you a lesson. The 100-year-old second strongest great master almost vomited blood. After that, the ferocity of the battle between the two sides increased further since the great master was extremely outraged to hear those words. At that point, the two sides reached a point where there was no room for negotiation. Therefore, innumerable people and Xian beasts amassed to fight at the risk of their lives. This led to the formation of a huge mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. But they didn't understand the reason for this hatred. Neither were they aware of the truth behind these events. Even the architect of this mishap, the Jun family's young master, Jun Moxie, was confused and stunned. I had only instructed you to wreak havoc, right? But now I see that you've instigated a world war. I can't be blamed for this battle. I didn't intend this to happen. I'm innocent. Li Zhutian devoted half his life to set up the Xuan manor. But it was on the verge of destruction. However, if he got to know that the real reason for his predicament was his desire to get a young concubine for his treasured son, it wouldn't be surprising if he turned red with anger and died. What's a femme fatale? No man could guess this term's meaning under these circumstances. But the corpses of the countless Xian beasts, and the blood, the innumerable Xian experts searched for this truth in the heavens above, and eventually came to know about the truth of the matter. Since time immemorial, there had been legends of beautiful women who had caused problems between countries. However, no woman had ever caused a problem between the human martial world and the beasts. Guan Qinghan, this young lady from the Jun family, was unprecedented. She could leave any other woman in the dust. If a list were to be drawn up regarding this, the Jun family's young lady, Guan Qinghan, would surely be adjudged the #1 beauty in the universe. It was only natural for such beauties to cause a ruckus in successive generations. And these beauties had one thing in common: they were innocent. And she was the most innocent of all. Guan Qinghan was unaware of this entire matter from the start. She was thousands of kilometers from this place of sorrow and tragedy. So, how would she know that a mountain of corpses was being formed because of her? In fact, this entire matter would remain an unresolved mystery for an eternity. At the moment, the 6 spirit Xian experts on the ground floor of the magnificent Jewel Hall were coming up with random conjectures. Similarly, Jun Moxie also frowned and pondered over this problem while hiding underground. This Xian beast uprising, what's its purpose? A battle of such massive armies? It's a waste, in my opinion. Jun Moxie stayed calmly inside the ground. His thoughts tossed and turned inside his mind. However, he felt as if he had failed to grasp the most important point of the matter. He felt that some unforeseen mishaps would exceed his expectations and preparations. In the end, he decided not to worry about it. Does this Xian beast uprising have any direct relations with me? In fact, I think this is very a fortuitous event. Besides, I'm only going to the Tianfa forest to hunt for treasures. The others may be going there to put a stop to this uprising. But I don't have the time to do that. Moreover, these people above are really hateful. They plan to deal with third uncle and the Jun family. In fact, they've gone as far as plotting to destroy our Jun family in one go. This can't be tolerated. Then, Jun Moxie escaped into the distance. He silently made his way inside the ground. The young Master Jun was very stealthy the entire time. This yin-yang escape was very mysterious. Even an extremely strong expert would be hard-pressed to find his silhouette. Earlier, Lei Wubei was able to detect faint signs of the young Master Jun. But he was unable to truly locate him in the end. Jun Moxie was truly amazed at the sharpness of the great master's senses. However, his confidence in the yin-yang escape had increased manyfold. If a great master was unable to find his tracks, one could forget about the small fries then. Xiao Fengwu wasn't present in that meeting. Perhaps it was because of his status. Perhaps he wasn't considered qualified enough to attend such high-class meetings. However, Jun Moxie hadn't forgotten the main purpose of his visit. Only a genuinely good item can provoke such a reaction from the Hongjun Pagoda. The Xiao family's soul-replenishing jade? That name is very awkward to pronounce. Jun Moxie criticized. The corners of his mouth became crooked. Xiao Bu used divine inhibition. Locking onto my soul sent for 500 kilometers. Humph. Humph. I will go into the Hongjun Pagoda once I've grabbed my prize. Even an ancient immortal's divine inhibition would be useless then, right? And, as for that soul scent locking technique, your technique may be awesome, but it won't be able to detect me, would it? As a matter of fact, this is precisely like those saying, virtue is 1 foot tall, but the devil is 10 foot in height. You're strong, but I am better than you. It is rare for a Xiao elder to show such good intentions. Xiao Fengwu is isolated in a separate room, as if offering to be robbed. Such good intentions fit well with me. It's like they are offering a present with both hands. So, how can I disappoint such good intentions and turn down this offer? Jun Moxie would feel very guilty if he turned down the Xiao family's second elder's well-intended offer. This Xiao family's second elder isn't merely magnanimous, but he's very easygoing too. Therefore, Jun Moxie started to search the entire building for the hidden treasure in high spirits. They've deliberately choreographed everything in a manner which would make it easy for me to steal the prize. So, it shouldn't be very difficult to find it. Jun Moxie's mind was calm as he searched each room in the building with his formidable spiritual sense. He realized that there was one thing that was common in each room. Everyone had secretly dispersed a part of their faintly discernible spiritual essence, whether strong or weak, inside the rooms with the purpose of monitoring them. Whereas, a secret room in the middle of the building was covered with layers of these essences. Therefore, a person who broke in wouldn't be able to retreat without getting smothered these layers. Jun Moxie smiled since he didn't feel any fear. He then stealthily started to move towards the secret room. Bullshit. You think yourselves to be great masters? You think your spirit's essence monitors the room? Really? You think too highly of yourselves. And underestimate me too much. Sure enough, everything was as expected. Xiao Fengwu sat crossed-legged and straight-backed inside the room. His eyes were closed. His face was a little pale. His hands were placed on his chest to support and protect a jade. That jade was the young Master Jun's main target, the Xiao family's soul-replenishing jade. This item was the genuine thing, not a fake. Jun Moxie could feel a massive amount of pure energy concealed in it. The Xian Qi cycled with every breath of Xiao Fengwu's. Bit by bit, it came out of the jade and was converted into absorbable Xian Qi, and would start to flow through the young man's meridians. It could be seen that Xiao Fengwu's complexion improved by an almost unnoticeable margin after every cycle. The usage of the Xiao family's soul-replenishing jade suddenly became clear to the young Master Jun. The young Master Jun could clearly feel the pure energy that Xiao Fengwu was absorbing. The jade concealed a lot of energy, but the young man was absorbing less than a fraction of it. However, Jun Moxie was very distressed at this. How can this bastard possess this item? How can this lowly Xiao family be allowed to hold such a precious treasure? How can they be considered a suitable owner for such an invaluable item? They shouldn't be allowed to possess this heavenly item. Their attitude is outrageous. They anger the heavens and infuriate the people. Only this young master is capable of being a flawless fit for that jade. Therefore, Jun Moxie flew across at a great speed without any hesitation. His hand became like an eagle's claw as it floated in front of his body. He then quickly grabbed the item. His movements were lightning fast. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 298. The Jade is running away. Xiao Fengwu was wholeheartedly absorbing the energy from the Jade. With that, the injuries to his body and meridians were getting healed. He knew that he was being used as bait because of his soul-replenishing Jade. And it would false to say that he wasn't afraid. There was a chance that the mysterious master wouldn't kill him since the youngster was too beneath his own self in terms of rank. However, Xiao Fengwu was panic-stricken at the thought that his injuries may not be able to fully heal if the mysterious master was to show up very early, though that fear was baseless. He'd have to suffer this pain for a few more days. Therefore, he diligently and wholeheartedly continued to absorb the pure energy from the Jade. The effect of this pure energy on his meridians was such that he could distinctly feel as if his entire body was soaked in a warm spring. He felt warm, relaxed, safe and comfortable. His seriously damaged meridians were getting restored at an astonishingly rapid speed. This amazingly and comfortable feeling almost made him feel like moaning. It was as if his mind was floating, like he was at the limits of the heavens. Xiao Fengwu felt he was intoxicated, and in a dream. Then, the jade he held suddenly disappeared during this period of comfort. Xiao Fengwu hastily opened his eyes in alarm. He saw that the jade wasn't on his chest, but was in fact floating in the air. However, it was going away from him rather quickly. What was most astonishing to Xiao Fengwu was that he could neither see a shadow, nor sense any person's aura. It was as if the jade had sprung a pair of legs, attained life, and was escaping on its own. How's this happening? What's happening? Is that mysterious master using Xian Qi to manipulate the soul-replenishing jade away from me? But there's no fluctuation in the Xian Qi either. Xiao Fengwu couldn't distinguish the truth of what he was witnessing. Xiao Fengwu's consciousness felt a bit fuzzy. He felt as if he was in a dream. He cocked his head to regain some sense. He realized that the jade would soon disappear. He was dismayed at the thought of losing the miraculous soul-replenishing jade. He was initially very reluctant, but he gathered some courage and exerted himself to shout mournfully, "Someone, come here, the jade is running away." The jade is running away? Jun Moxie almost laughed and gave away his position in the nothingness. Dang! This guy is very talented. The jade is undoubtedly a marvelous thing. But it's still an inanimate object. To say that it's running away, I'm truly speechless. However, Xiao Fengwu was desperate. Moreover, he was at a loss as to how he'd explain what was happening in front of his eyes. As for someone snatching it from him and running away with it, well, he couldn't see anyone. In fact, he couldn't even see the shadow of a ghost. Therefore, Xiao Fengwu had shouted in desperation, "The jade is running away," not realizing how ridiculous it sounded. Though his words had managed to accurately describe what he could see. Someone is attempting to steal the soul-replenishing jade. Xiao Buyu was in the other room. But his white eyebrows shot up the moment Jun Moxie snatched the jade from Xiao Fengwu's hands. He had initiated his divine inhibition, and it had instantly transmitted a message to his mind. Then, a delicate green eagle quickly flew out of his chest and flew straight towards Xiao Fengwu's room. This result was something which he didn't expect. In fact, it was beyond reason. The third elder had described the mysterious man's tyrannical strength and temperament. And, since the former had already discounted the status of his opponent and snatched away the younger generation's treasure, it was unlikely that he wouldn't attempt to take the other half as well. In fact, he had no doubts about it. However, the room was covered with many layers of spiritual essence at that point of time. Thus, it had a very powerful defense mechanism. Even the first great master, Yun Chen, would find it hard to conceal his position. So, it would be impossible that a normal person wouldn't trigger the spiritual essences that were being used to guard it. But, this mysterious person had managed to infiltrate without giving anything away. Such skill was extraordinary and extremely rare. The next moment, Xiao Buyu's slim body quickly flew out, light as a feather and swift as the mist. He flew to the secret room where the injured Xiao Wu was getting healed. Xiao Buyu simultaneously let out a gentle yet shrill and scream. The volume of the scream wasn't very high, but it was uninterrupted, and alarmed the entire magnificent jewel hall. The spirit Xian experts reacted with an amazing speed. In an instant, there were 12 experts who had surrounded Xiao Fengwu's room in accordance with the plans set out earlier. Everyone in that cordon focused their full attention, and seemed prepared to react at any moment. This man had infiltrated several layers of spiritual essence, and had stolen the jade. He wasn't a regular foe. Everyone understood this. This man is a major enemy. Xiao Buyu's shrill scream hadn't yet ceased. His eyes were brimming killing intention. The elder then took initiative, and rushed into Xiao Fengwu's room. He attacked the thick red sandalwood door with his Xian Qi when he was about 7 feet from the room. The door then silently disintegrated into small fragments and disappeared midair. Xiao Buyu ducked into the room like a young dragon. The speed of his movements had been as fast as lightning. Xiao Buyu had counted the chickens before the eggs had hatched. He believed that his troops would simultaneously move into action if he took the lead. However, he needn't have every man burst into the room. That would result in a chaotic situation, and would instead help the mysterious man to escape. Therefore, he had decided that only the strongest person would burst through the door, while the rest of them would form a huge encirclement around the room. They could then initiate strict surveillance, and block off any route the escapee could attempt to use. In that case, the thief would have to face one of them head-on if were to step out of the room, no matter which escape route he'd try to take. If the one blocking that mysterious man's path brought out his full power, and managed to stop him for even a moment, that would be enough for the rest of them to surround the enemy and mount a joint attack. Xiao Buyu had full confidence in his people, even the weakest one amongst them. They could even make it hard for the strongest of the 8 great masters, Yun Chen, to break through as long as they had put their life on the line. Forget about other people. Xiao Buyu wouldn't believe that there was someone in this world who could escape his line of sight at this juncture. Moreover, 5 spirit Xian experts and the Silver Blizzard City's 7 swords were waiting outside. That mysterious man was able to infiltrate the room very stealthily, but it would be a joke to think that he'd be able to escape such a tight cordon. This arrangement was absolutely flawless and secure. There was no chance of any mishap. However, Xiao Buyu hadn't realized that mishaps often happen unexpectedly. He broke in and flew inside Xiao Fengwu's room. He was covered in spirit realm Xian Qi from head to toe, and had burst in like a massive cluster of tornadoes. He had heard the rumors about that masked man's terrifying strength. Though, he wasn't afraid of that. He had also been provided a description of that man's character by the third and the sixth elder. And he feared it. He was worried by his own negligence could help that masked man escape. So, could he dare to be careless at that point? His body was covered with Xian qi as he entered. Then, he quickly spun in a circle on his toes. It appeared as if a ballerina was trying to perform a very difficult move. However, Xiao Buyu couldn't find anything strange in the room. Only Xiao Fengwu was present inside the room. He stood with a foolish expression on his face. "Where is that man?" Xiao Buyu yelled. He thought to himself. "Don't tell me that we're too late. This is impossible." The fragrance eagle also flew in this direction. What did we do wrong? Which man? Xiao Fengwu was at a loss as to what his grandfather had just asked him. So, he asked in confusion. "The man who stole your jade. Are you an idiot?" Xiao Buyu felt like vomiting blood because of his own grandson. Dang it! That man snatched that jade from his hands. Yet he asks, "Which man?" It was a good thing that Xiao Buyu had enough cultivation. Otherwise, he would have caught fire due to his own rage. There was nobody here. Xiao Fengwu was dazed. He looked at his empty hands, and then at his angry grandfather. He was at a loss as to what had just happened, and was endlessly confused. How did that jade fly away from me? This is extremely strange. Did it turn into a ghost? Nobody took away your jade from your hands? Are you telling this old man that the soul-replenishing jade sprung wings and flew away on its own? Came a loud rebuke in reply. Yes, grandfather. It was very strange. The jade didn't grow wings, but it did fly away on its own, really. Xiao Fengwu's face was truly earnest. You're a piece of trash. Xiao Buyu rained curses in anger. His clothes made a whooshing sound as he leapt into the air. His face was dark with anger. I have seen useless individuals. I have even seen idiots, but I've never seen trash such as this. And unexpectedly, this kind of trash is my grandson. Well, I'm telling the truth, the jade flew away. It didn't grow wings, but it flew away, and it did so very quickly. Xiao Fengwu mumbled as he stood in front of Xiao Buyu. He felt wronged, and felt that he was being treated unjustly. Why do I even speak the truth when no one is ready to believe me nowadays? I'm only speaking about things that I've seen with my eyes. I'm your grandfather. You scoundrel. How dare you speak such nonsense in front of me? Xiao Buyu rained curses while in midair. The qi congealed in his palm came down like the wind, and hit his grandson's face with a bang. Xiao Fengwu staggered a little bit, and fell down. His face swelled up. Xiao Fengwu covered his face in resentment. But he kept his feelings to his heart. Bullshit. You're my grandfather? Then, find that person. But you're no grandfather of mine if you can't find that person. Xiao Buyu's body shot up like a meteor in the horizon, and rose 30 meters above the magnificent jewel hall. He started to roam around in wide circles. He was as quick as lightning. His eyes took in everything under the starlight for around 5 kilometers. However, he couldn't find the tiniest of clues. Can that man's movements be this stealthy? The small fragrance eagle also circled around with him. It was evident that it had also lost bearing of its target. How is this possible? Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 299. We fell head first. Xiao Buyu's voice was gentle, yet it echoed heavily. It seemed as if a volcano was about to burst. He was unable to restrain his emotions. Did you see anyone go out? The 12 experts who had covered the escape routes looked at each other in dismay. We weren't able to discover him when he infiltrated the place. So, how do you expect us to find him now? Nobody came out. Ah. Be at ease. Second brother. The 12 of us have set up a very tight cordon. Even a mosquito won't be able to fly out and escape. Therefore, I request second brother to make the move. The third elder touched his sword's handle. He had spoken those words in a respectful manner. His white hair was like strands of silver. His beard was as white as snow, while his sword shone with a cold light. Third elder brother is right. Please be at ease. Second elder brother, everyone echoed their agreement. It seemed like they were making a solemn vow. Xiao Buyu would have been gratified if he had heard these words earlier. In fact, he would have even felt proud. After all, the abilities of his junior brothers could never be doubted. However, at present, their bold words sounded ridiculous to his ears. In fact, he felt somewhat ashamed of them. An incomparable feeling of helplessness arose from his heart. He looked up and let out a long and desolate sigh. Then, the second brother slowly descended to the top of the magnificent jewel hall, and stood there in a daze. Is something wrong, second brother? Everyone could see that his mood wasn't good. So, they couldn't help but crowd around him, and inquired with concern. We fell head first. Xiao Buyu sighed deeply and looked into the distance. His expression was melancholic and desolate. It revealed the utter humiliation his heart was suffering. Who was this man who stole the soul-replenishing jade? Who in this world could possess such godly and clever methods that we couldn't even track them? He came in without exposing his tracks, or even a shadow. He left without leaving a single trace. Could Master Yunbi Chen and the other legendary characters have pulled this off? We fell head first. Second brother, what are you saying? Each one of the other 12 experts turned pale without exception. After Xiao Buyu had said, someone is stealing the soul-replenishing jade, everyone knew what had happened. They had presumed that that mysterious man had finally appeared. Everyone was in high spirits, and was rearing for a fight. They wanted to see who was superior between them and that man. However, they couldn't even find his shadow. Everyone assumed that it was a false alarm. But then, they heard that they had fallen headfirst from Xiao Buyu's very mouth. Could someone have lived long enough to reach their age if they couldn't even comprehend the meaning behind this sentence? Could it be? Everyone looked at Xiao Buyu and noticed his expression. Their words were inquisitive in nature. Their expression revealed their disbelief, but the tone of their voice suggested that they had already started to believe it. Yes, you've guessed right. The soul-replenishing jade has fallen into the hands of that man. Xiao Buyu's gentle voice seemed gloomy. In fact, he couldn't talk properly because of his dismal. I couldn't even see that person's shadow. And the jade has disappeared without a trace. We couldn't see the man even though we gave him an immediate chase. You people obviously couldn't spot that needle in the haystack either. This is one tumble the Silver Blizzard City has taken headfirst. How can that be? Second brother. We mustn't forget that you had used your divine inhibition on the jade. The ninth elder stared wide-eyed. But with the precautions we took, wouldn't it be easy to find him if we wanted to? Everyone had a, "you are an idiot," expression on their faces the moment those words left his mouth. Would the second brother show such a mournful expression if his methods were of any use now? However, Everyone's expression underwent a huge transformation as they thought of this. It's of no use. The moment that man laid his hands on the soul-replenishing jade, his superior method eliminated my divine inhibition and the 500 kilometers soul-scent lock. We can't use them now. Xiao Buyu looked up at the small green eagle that was soaring above. He felt very helpless. How's this possible? The 12 experts gasped a mouthful of air. The divine inhibition links itself to the target's body once it makes contact. So, how could a person break away from this connection without a trace? Moreover, what kind of strength did this person possess to pull this off? Furthermore, the 500 kilometers soul scent lock is a secret substance of the Silver Blizzard City. It literally sticks to a person's soul once it makes contact with its target. Only the special antidote from the Silver City could remove that smell. Otherwise, it would remain stuck to a person throughout their lives. So, how was this man able to remove it? This entire matter seems completely inconceivable. Are you sure? Second brother, a stern voice asked. Everyone turned to the source of the voice and realized that the fifth elder had spoken those words. Out of the 9 brothers, he was the most cautious one. I'm sure. Xiao Buyu sighed and frowned. It seemed that he had aged 10 years in an instant. Then, he continued softly. My main concern right now is that he was able to eliminate the divine inhibition and the 500 kilometers soul scent locking. So, we can't say that his strength is number 1 under the heavens, but it is many levels above ours. So, I reckon that if he wants to obtain our soul-replenishing jades, he could do it with ease. In fact, it wouldn't be difficult for him to compel us into surrendering the remaining jades by attacking the Silver Blizzard City, so. Everyone understood the meaning behind his words very clearly. Yes, if he's truly an unrivaled expert, why would he willingly shoulder the reputation of a thief throughout his life? His name would be tainted with that reputation. And he won't be able to remove this stain if he were to become famous throughout the land in the future. This doesn't make any sense. Everyone went silent. If everyone present fought with heart and courage, their strength would have possibly been enough to prevail over the great 8 masters. However, this man hadn't revealed himself. And those 13 experts from the Silver Blizzard City had fallen headfirst into a tumble against this mysterious man. So, everyone felt frustrated. But they were also afraid of him. In fact, they were extremely scared. We're lucky that he only wanted to steal the jade. Had he intended on fighting with us, wouldn't he have been able to pinch us to death like we were nothing more than river snails? The 7 swords of the Silver Blizzard City stood expressionless. However, they were clenching the hilts of their swords so sharply that their bones were visible. I've held my head with complacence in the Silver Blizzard City for the last 30 years. But I've unexpectedly been handed a defeat today. Xiao Buyu moved his hands behind his back as he stood at the summit of magnificent Jewel Hall. He pensively gazed at the Tianxiang city. The city seemed ablaze with lights under the luminous starlight. He then let out a long sigh and stood motionless for a long time. The 12 experts felt a somewhat stifling sensation in their chests. The mere process of breathing had started to seem like a tough task, as if the vast sky above the Tianxiang city was suddenly pressing down on them. They felt as if layer upon layer of heavy pressure had started to descend upon their minds. Hurry up and fly to the Silver Blizzard City. Inform them about today's matter. We shall leave for Tianfa soon. This place hasn't been benevolent to us. We must hurry. Xiao Buyu's white hair, beard and gown rustled as they floated in the wind. His voice was extremely desolate and bleak. It seemed that the pride and arrogance, everything he had cultivated throughout the years, had left his body as he spoke those words. There was an air of unspeakable dismal about him. It felt as if this was the end of the road for a hero. Second brother, the 12 experts called out in concern. Xiao Buyu waved his sleeve. Too much thinking isn't good for you. Everyone must go and rest. His body moved as he finished his sentence. Then, he suddenly vanished from the rooftop, leaving behind a heavy and desolate aura. Jun Moxie had smoothly put the soul-replenishing jade in the Hongjun pagoda in a split second. Then, he had put all of his effort into initiating the yin-yang escape, and had stood motionlessly in the corner of Xiao Fengwu's room. The young Master Jun had decided to quietly observe the situation, and any changes which would occur thereafter. However, Xiao Buyu had burst in the moment he put the jade away. The elder's sharp xian qi had dispersed in all directions, along with his divine inhibition. It was as if 1,000 sharp swords were swinging wildly in the air. It had almost made it difficult for Jun Moxie to breathe. He couldn't help but be astonished. This person from the Silver Blizzard City is no small fry. His imposing aura is slightly inferior to the solitary falcons, but not by much. No wonder the Silver Blizzard City was so confident about their plans. After that, Jun Moxie settled in to watch the drama unfold free of cost. He could only feel one thing about these experts from the Silver Blizzard City: they are amazing. He was nothing more than a small fry in front of them. However, these great shark-like spirit Xian experts had praised him, and had nearly declared him the #1 expert under the heavens. This was very pleasurable for him. In fact, it was almost too pleasurable. It was only natural that the young Master Jun was merely observing everything from the sidelines at the time, nothing more. He wasn't going to make his opinions known at that point. So, when Xiao Buyu was standing depressed, Jun Moxie stood not far away from his side. He had placed his hands on his knees, and looked at the elder's face with interest. The young Master Jun was deriving joy in his sadness. Jun Moxie unexpectedly felt very relaxed when he witnessed Xiao Buyu make a sudden decision go to Tianfa. He was aware that these people would try to make things difficult for him and his uncle in the Tianfa forest. In fact, they might even try to kill the solitary falcon, but he wasn't worried about it. He was aware that the effect of his aura would be far worse in the south than it was here. So, would he need to fear them? That would be a big joke. However, he was worried about the possibility of these people from the Silver Blizzard City intercepting and attacking Jun Wuyi's army en route. The chances of this taking place were very slim. In fact, it seemed ridiculous. But this was Jun Moxie's main concern. Everything else was unimportant in contrast. Therefore, Jun Moxie didn't leave since he had decided to keep watch from the top of the magnificent jewel hall. He would only feel relieved after he'd see them leave. Then, he would try his best to delay the movement of the army, since it wouldn't be good for him if these people were to attack the army midway. The next morning, Jun Moxie saw the Silver City's 6 great elders, 7 Sky Xian Peak experts, Xiao Han and Mu Shuatong again. The pale-faced and weak Xiao Fengwu, and Princess Han Yen Meng and her luggage were accompanying them as they departed in a grand manner. He saw them leave the Tianxiang city, and trailed them for half a kilometer. He noticed that they were completely engrossed in their journey. So, he felt relieved and set off to return home. "You've finally fled. Tianxiang is my world now." Jun Moxie returned home feeling as light as a feather. He felt incomparably relieved. He had barely reached the gates when his nostrils were assailed by an extremely acrid smell. He nearly tumbled. What is this matter about? He carefully tried to ascertain its origin, and jumped up in fright. My heavens! Ah! What's this? Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 300. That's how ingredients are procured. He hadn't noticed that a group of soldiers had escorted over 10 chariots to the Jun residence gate. One team of soldiers was moving the boxes from the carts onto the ground. Each of those boxes was either bulky or delicate. And the extremely pungent smell of medicines which had assailed his nostrils was originating from these boxes. Fortunately, those boxes were being moved inside the house, not outside. Otherwise, Jun Moxie's first response would have been, "People have raided our house. They are confiscating our stuff." The scene was very chaotic to begin with. However, it didn't end there. A group of approximately 50 middle-aged men were scrambling around. They were calling out loud mournfully as they implemented. This had made the entire situation even more chaotic. What is going on? What in the world is happening here? What is this? Jun Moxie walked through the crowd with suspicion and doubts in his mind. And, just when he was about to enter through the gate, he heard loud cries from his side. The mournful middle-aged men had come rushing towards him, and had started to kneel in front of him. Their faces were covered with snot and tears. They started to implore, "Young Master Jun, please be kind. Please be generous and let us off. We wish you a long life. We pray you have a blessed life of 100 years, and you attain a great position in the court. Have pity on our small businesses. We have families to feed. Please have mercy on us." Jun Moxie was stumped. How am I related to this? What are they saying? They are making it seem like this young master is an evil man from the legends who forces girls into prostitution, like I am an evil tyrant who brings great misfortune and oppresses people. Who are these folks? What is this? What's the matter? Jun Moxie frowned. He knew that those merchants wouldn't dare to talk back to someone of his stature. So, he asked a soldier standing at the side. But the soldier merely shook his head. Unexpectedly, he wasn't aware of the reason behind that commotion either. Just when the young Master Jun started to feel gloomy, the ground started to shake. Then, a monstrous head arrived. "I've brought the medicines you had asked for. The ones which were easily accessible, and the ones which weren't. I've brought them all." Fatty Tang chimed in his distinctive intonation. It seemed as if he were showing off his treasures. He then extended his round and fat bear's claw of a hand to gesture. "And these are it." Your brother moved fast, and gave his 100% to the task. Jun Moxie felt somewhat dizzy. "I had told you to get as many ingredients for my medicines as you could. But this is too much. And what's the deal with these middle-aged men?" He couldn't help but blurt out, "How did you get so many ingredients? And what's the matter with these people?" "Ah, young master, everyone is on the same side. So, why do you speak so formally? And why do you look so confused?" Tang Yuan squeezed through the crowd and winked, as if to imply a clear understanding between the two. "Young Master Tang, young Master Jun, please be kind to us. Please let us off. We beg you, leave some means for our survival." The middle-aged men started to weep the moment they saw Tang Yuan. They then surrounded the two young masters, kneeled in front of them, and started to knock their heads on the ground. "You!" Jun Moxie was stunned for a while. Then, he slowly started to understand what had happened, by and large. It seemed that Fatty Tang had gone to several pharmaceutical families, and had seized these ingredients from their stores. And if I'm not mistaken, these people may not have been in a position to give out such a large amount of raw material. You had urgently asked for these ingredients. But the amount was a lot. How could I have procured so much in such little time? And where would I go to get those ingredients for you? So, this young master frowned and carefully devised a plan with his foresight. Tang Yuan looked very pleased with himself as he spoke. Therefore, I made arrangements to go to these pharmacies. Then, I made my desire to buy the ingredients known to them. However, you had asked for a very high amount of ingredients, and they said that they didn't wish to part with so much of it. They told me that they wouldn't be able to conduct their day-to-day business if they sell the ingredients you required. Jun Moxie was speechless. He rolled his eyes. You've made a stupid move. How will they do business if you seize their stock with prior notice? Don't you know that it takes several days for one family to complete its turnover? And, did you just say, all of it? Have you taken everything in their stores? So, this elder brother got very angry. Tang Yuan's eyes opened wide, and a murderous expression emerged inside them. They had refused to do business with me. They weren't selling anything to me. That clearly meant that they were trying to defraud me by force. Really? How could they do that? They dared to bully us two brothers. And, isn't this a breach of the law? So, I straight away went to the Ministry of Justice and obtained a written approval. Then, I set upon rectifying these people. I then went to the biggest families, and because they acted so tough yesterday, I took everything they had and closed their shops. Now, I've transported those medicinal ingredients here. Jun Moxie staggered. What reason did you give to the ministry to seize these items from these families? Did you tell the Ministry of Justice that you wanted it, and they thought that it was awesome, and gave you the written approval? Third young master, aren't you being foolish? Why are you talking like you don't know how the business works? Tang Yuan looked at him suspiciously. We can seize their stuff whenever we want because of our status. Why do we need to give any justification? They will learn to respect us if we can go and seize their families' resources at our whims. That is exactly why powerful people go and make arrests for baseless things. They seize the businesses and wait for a few days. Then, they usually let the owners go if they're in a good mood. However, they chop everyone's heads off if they're in a foul one, since listening to these laments about trivial matters is very annoying. The corners of Tang Yuan's mouth rose upwards. He then made a scoffing sound. Jun Moxie stared with his eyes wide open. This was the first time he realized that he hadn't properly integrated with his social status since crossing over to this new world. Tang Yuan's ideology was very reasonable. Given the setting of this feudal society, would two young nobles like Tang Yuan and Jun Moxie need to give any justification if they wanted the entire stock from a shop? But, isn't it too forceful and tyrannical? There was no better way to explain it. Jun Moxie and Tang Yuan could act harsh and unreasonable. Their status would allow them to walk into any shop and seize the family's entire business. Even if they were to kill each of these people, they could turn to the Ministry of Justice. After that, they could strut around and say, "We've killed them." But it's important to mete out justice to those who deserve punishment. We acted in accordance to reasonable self-defense and deserve to be accorded an imperial commendation. Oh, and wait, the dead man's family still owes compensation for the damage to our spirit. Humph. We had suffered quite a shock, but what of the family whose men you murdered? Send them all to prison. Otherwise, they'd trouble me if they were left in the open. And, if you lowly officials have a problem with it, I don't mind sending you to prison for a few days. This, I've decided. This was an advantage of such a high status in this type of a society. It might as well be asked how many people in all of Tianxiang could provoke the two great families of Tang and Jun. I can't speak for this world, but I could never have acted like this in the previous one, the internet would've, so this really is a different world. Jun Moxie turned around to look at the numerous entreating faces. He counted their numbers. Eventually, he figured that shopkeepers from pharmacies of 7 families were present outside his door. He had started to understand this matter very clearly. Fatty Tang had acted exactly like the hitman Jun would've. He killed the target and moved on without a second thought. But the base of this matter. Everyone heard me, right? Do you know what the problem is? Let me tell you, this elder isn't happy. Let me ask you, who in Tianxiang Empire dares to refuse business with this elder? Tang Yuan had cried his throat hoarse with this nonsense. How could those pharmacists have missed his it? I regret this now, from the bottom of my very heart, and even my guts. I would have given him a cheap bargain if I had known that this would happen. Maybe he would have left me alone if I had given him a present as well. We can't do business beyond 10 to 15 days under these circumstances. If I look at things now, my family is ruined. The pleading members of the crowd nodded in agreement about something. We're willing to offer all of our family properties to the 2 young masters. We merely ask that the 2 young masters don't take the entirety of our stock and show us some mercy. Bullshit. Do you think this young master is poor? You think I need your offerings? Besides, what could you offer me except medicines? Dang it! Will you give me medicines along with the gifts? Are you hoping that I fall ill? Would you be happy if I died? Tang Yuan shouted as he waved his status in their face once again. We hope that you both fall ill. The common people will be very fortunate if you fall ill and die. The shopkeepers thought angrily. However, their faces only showed obeisance out of fear. Everyone, listen. Our aristocratic hall needs those ingredients urgently. We had no choice but to use such a method to obtain them. I'll gladly accept your medicines for now. But later, you can arrange an accountant and settle the accounts with young Master Tang. This young master will ensure that you get paid, no matter what amount we will have owed you. We'll buy your goods at fair prices. We don't try to cheat anyone. Shall we agree upon this, gentlemen? Jun Moxie had deliberated at length before he finally opened his mouth. Why would he wish to exploit those shopkeepers by using his status? It didn't feel good. Fatty had overstepped the boundary a bit too much in this case. So, it was better to settle this matter as quickly as possible, since it would be quite improper if any more trouble was unnecessarily provoked. Yes. Yes. We lowly people wouldn't dare object. You wouldn't dare to object? I'm in charge here. The decision is mine anyway. Good. Now, everyone must return to their homes. This matter had been decided. Jun Moxie frowned at Tang Yuan. Foot the bill for these urgently needed ingredients to me. Pay them double the price. Anyway, I had instructed you to pay a higher price. And yes, tell the authorities to remove those trivial accusations. These people are innocent. Let them go. Tang Yuan's face twitched in distress. Pay them double. We lowly folks wouldn't dare. With this, the matter was finally resolved. The shopkeepers relaxed and sighed in relief. They didn't say anything since they didn't wish to get into more trouble over these ingredients. But, at least their family businesses had been saved. And I don't want so much of it. I won't need whatever is remaining after I'm done filtering through them. Jun Moxie pointed at the ingredients and spoke. He barely took a step before he stopped. Oh, that's right, send your shop assistant to lend a hand. Otherwise, I don't know when I'll be able to finish with such a large amount. The shopkeepers agreed with pained expressions. They could only think, what way of the world is this? We run honest businesses. We didn't provoke anybody. However, one person comes out of the blue and seizes our family business. Then, he threatens us with death. Then unexpectedly, we're let off. And we're grateful for that. But now, we have to send our assistants to help sort out and recycle whatever this person doesn't use. Oh, and we have to keep a smiling face the entire time. This is unfair. This is very unfair. Why didn't I see this coming? All 7 shopkeepers thought of the same thing in unison. Good. Now relax and do what I just told you to do. And hurry up. Everyone get moving. Now. Jun Moxie pulled up his gown and proceeded in through the door. He could faintly hear Tang Yuan's voice in the background. It seemed that he was gnashing his teeth. So, you guys opened your mouths and convinced the young master to pay you double. We wouldn't dare to. The replying voices were full of respect and humility. Jun Moxie couldn't help but smile. He felt that status and authority was handy in dealing with things. Ah, why hadn't I thought of this earlier? These pharmacies didn't have any legendary medicines in their stock, but they had every common one a person could hope for. I could have saved so much time if I thought of this earlier. Ah! This story will be continued to chapter 301. For those of you who are not subscribed yet, please subscribe. The interesting and best stories will be updated. See you again in the next episode.